Pretty much.
Good morning. Welcome to our regularly scheduled meeting of the Board of Supervisors of Tulare County. If you would please stand and join me in a flag salute and remain standing for a moment of silence. Ready? Salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please be seated. I have a small gathering here today. We'll bring up item number 1, our Board of Supervisors matters, begin with Supervisor Vanderpool.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. First of all, just wanted to congratulate. It's pretty rare that you don't see twins that often, but twins that are turning 80 years old. That's pretty darn cool. And this weekend they had there was a celebration for Joe and Mario Samoys in Tipton on Saturday. I think every person in the South County was there. Those of you who know a lot in the Portuguese community know that they all show up in force when there are celebrations. So there was I would say there were at least 2,000 or 3,000 people that were at this celebration at the Tipton Hall. So congratulations to the Samoys family and to those brothers. This Friday, the United Way will be having their annual community breakfast. It begins at 7, and it's at the Holiday Inn. Can't guarantee too much. I know that the food will be good. Reese Foods has donated the food, and I can also tell you the MC will be pretty good as well because I'm emceeing the event. And then lastly, this Saturday is one of my favorite days of the year. College football Saturday kicks off this year. I say go Bruins. I look over at Supervisor Ishida wearing his Fresno State tie. I got my UCLA blue on. Go Bruins, and hope it's a great college football season. That's all I've got. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Supervisor Cox?
I'll also be at the United Way breakfast Friday morning, and Supervisor Vanderpool, I have heard you MC before. Last Wednesday,
No editorial comments.
No editorial comments. Last Wednesday, Allison Pierce and I attended the Latino Rotary here in Visalia. We were able to present a program to them in regards to what Step Up has been doing over the last 7 years. It was a very good presentation, very good event. This Sunday, I was able to visit the opening of the Dutch Ag Museum at our Farm Labor Museum. It was very well attended. Got to have some good Dutch food, and heard some stories from people that were that came over here in the 40s. So it was very nice event. There was some accordion singing, and really, I thought it was really cool because they passed around sheets of music, and the older people didn't need the music. They were swaying and singing, so it was a pretty fun event. Tomorrow I'll meet with a group of adoption workers over on the Mineral King properties, and then this Thursday I'll be interviewing a couple members for the Agricultural Policy Advisory Committee with the chair and vice chair of that group. That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Supervisor Sheeta?
Last Thursday, Supervisor Worthley and I attended a meeting in Fresno about forming the JPA for Temperance Flat. And the meeting was very well attended. I think we have some disagreements at the present time with Fresno County on how that JPA should go together. I personally believe that you need to have as many different entities involved in the JPA, like the irrigation districts, the tribe, all the different groups to be representative, and that way you get a lot more mileage when you go in front of the Water Commission stating that you represent a broad group of people with a broad amount of benefits to all those people. So we need to iron that issue out at the present time. Friday, I attended a roundtable sponsored by Speaker of the Assembly, Atkins, And basically what it was is trying to figure out how they're going to tax us for transportation. And there are a lot of proposals out there, and they're pretty stiff, the amount of monies that they want to impose on for transportation. In the past, the issues have been with the counties and the cities, local government, is the fact that when you pass a measure for taxation, they divert the money and put it in the general fund or put it someplace else other than transportation. So not only I, but others have also pointed that out, that we would not support a transportation tax unless there was a lockbox on that amount of money and that it went strictly for transportation. One of the sticking points we have is the truck weight fee. It's about $1 billion a year that the state has been siphoning off from the transportation account and putting it in the general fund. The other thing that came up was the state of California has borrowed $4 billion from the transportation fund. And it doesn't seem like they have any desire to pay the $4 billion off. They figure that this new tax would be a way to raise monies without paying off back the $4 billion. So I think they're going to have a kind of a hill to climb with the local government entities, because we are just tired of them siphoning money off that has been designated for let's say transportation or other measures that we voted on, like cap and trade that we didn't vote on. They've been siphoning off. So there's a lot of dissatisfaction with how the money is being shuffled around. Yeah. And that's all I have.
Okay. Supervisor Guinness?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I've been listening to some of those stories too, Supervisor Sheeta. And per unit, $35. Per license fee, $35. Raising the gas tax. I mean, like you say, the weight fees are the major thing, and that's what's on all of our trucks. But if that goes forward, I'll just have to get rid of some units, I guess. You can't afford to have something sitting around if you're not using it every day. Last week I attended the Resource Fair in Porterville last Thursday night at Manual Church. CSET, OES, and Andrew and folks was out there. That's where we have our office. That's where we have the showers that are available to people on the east side to come take showers. Listening to the CSET group that was there, they're taking care of a lot of people every day. Well over 200 people a day, which is unbelievable. And then, like Nestle with the water, extra water they brought in, and then the water from just people donating, and then the resumes that we've got are the little deals we fill out so that people can get it delivered to their house. So nobody should be doing without out there. I drove down Van Day Avenue, and I think I counted 5 big tanks, and that's in the city that has been put in. So I think Andrew told me he was putting 40 a weekend countywide, so that's quite a deal. But congratulations and for all the good works that they're doing out there on the east side and throughout the county to help these people whose wells have gone dry. Also glad to see on the agenda today that the Deer Creek Bridge the bid has been processed, and that's going to be starting shortly. That's about a 6-month project. Hopefully, if they can get it in place prior to this, what I call El Menudo coming in. They call it El Nino. I call it El Menudo. I'm hoping we have a super mix. I'd like to see the water run over the spillway again at Lake Success. That's how good I'd like to see it be. So a lot of stuff going on right now. Thanks to Michael Grove and his group, I'm getting paperwork, lots of paperwork across my desk every week on the illegal marijuana farms. And Sheriff Boudreaux and his group for going out there and following up on all these people that seem to think that they can still raise this stuff out in our county illegally and get away with it, even with a water shortage. So thanks for all the hard work from everybody and all the staff and employees at Tulare County for what you do every day. Thank you.
Thank you. On this matter of transportation, as Supervisor Sheeta brought up, we will have CSAC's President Matt Cate here today. One of the topics he's going to want to discuss will be this transportation issue. And I think fundamentally one of the things to keep in mind is that California has the highest gasoline fuel tax in the nation. And it's always important to keep those sort of things in context, because when they talk about raising taxes, if we were the lowest tax fuel tax state in the country, we might think that made a lot more sense. When you're the highest, and you look at the economies of scale, 38 million people in California, we ought to have a heck of a road system in this county, in this state, and it should be funded by the taxes that are now being generated. But I saw something the other day that said that the fuel tax in California generates over $10 billion a year, and Caltrans is spending about $2 billion a year on actual road construction. So it shows you, again, it's an allocation issue. So often our problem is not having enough taxes. There's plenty of taxes. It's how those tax dollars are being allocated. That's one supervisor's opinion. Just this last week was a very busy time. I did have a fun thing on Wednesday. I had a tour of the main library historical room, and it's quite extensive. I thought there was one room devoted to history, but there's actually three, and the resources there are quite incredible. There are maps and photographs and resources of all kinds, secondary, primary resources, and mainly this is manned by volunteers. Volunteers do a lot of this work there. And so it made me think about, in our basement, we have the founding documents of Tulare County dating back to 1852. And I know there have been conversations going back maybe 15 years ago or 10 years ago about having those digitized and available to the public, and that not happen. But we really need to pursue that, because if something were to happen to those documents in a fire or flood or something like that, I'd be ashamed to lose them. We need to have them digitized and then available to the public. But it was a great tour, and I want to thank library staff for the tour and the volunteers for all the work that they do there. Also on Thursday, I was at a meeting sponsored by Food Link, and had a lot of federal officials there about trying to expand the food service in the summertime for those children primarily who receive free meals during the school year. During the summer, of course, they're still hungry. But there are big issues in Tulare County with being a rural county, because so many of our schools are rural schools. And so having meals at the school when your students are not there, because it's not like they can walk to the school and get there, presents a lot of problems. And so the need is to be very strategic going forward. If there's something that can be done, how it would look in Tulare County. It won't definitely be one size fits all. One of the superintendents brought up, I thought, an excellent point, which is the quality of the food may be fine, but how does it taste? And we have a certain ethnic thought about how food ought to taste in Tulare County, and I'm one of them. I like it spicy. I like it to taste good. And if it doesn't taste good, the kids just look at it. It may be healthy for them, but it doesn't do a lot of good if it doesn't get into their stomachs, because they just turn their nose up about it. But anyway, it was a very good meeting, and I think it was good to meet with some of those federal officials so they could hear some of the local concerns about how to address this particular issue. We had a San Joaquin Valley Insurance Authority meeting on last Friday. Very, very productive meeting, talking about our rates, which will be coming out. Proposed rate increases, which are again very favorable to our employees and below market rates increases across the board. So it's good to see that that's been a very, very successful program. We have a couple more counties looking to come on board, so to increase our population. And the more people we have participating in the program, the greater our leverage ability to negotiate with the insurance companies on our rates. That's all I have for today, and we will now go to presenting a proclamation honoring Nestle Waters for its generous donation of bottled drinking water to the County of Tulare for distribution to residents suffering from the effects of the drought. And I believe, yes, our OES Man of the Year is here today. Andrew, good to see you. You're still standing, I see.
Still vertical somehow. Thank you, Supervisor. Supervisor, CEO, Council, good morning. I'd also like to invite John Donaldson to the podium from Nestle Waters to receive the proclamation. I'd like to supplement the proclamation and not steal your thunder of actually reading the verbiage there. We wanted to start a trend of recognizing all of the partners here. Certainly whenever I'm in front of you, we make a point of recognizing all the county partners. Today I have Dave Lee from my staff, who's been our logistics section chief. He's been coordinating all of these donations, all of the movement of goods all over the county. Obviously we couldn't do this without facilities and general services and RMA letting us squat and not have to pay rent for storing some of this stuff. RMA moving resources around for us, the Sheriff's Department for lending us their forklift and their personnel, and even some inmates to help us load and unload and all these mundane tasks. Really, we wanted to start a trend of recognizing external partners. We couldn't think of a better place to start today than Nestle. As you're aware, as Supervisor Ennis noted, the Resource Center out in East Porterville has been a huge success. CSET is staffing it. It started as a goodwill effort with the church out there. Pastor Roman Hernandez at Iglesia Emmanuel Church has been phenomenal. We have the showers, we have the offices, and we have arguably most importantly, the point of distribution for water. That's really designed to be a first line of defense for folks. As their wells go dry, they have somewhere to go right now, not waiting a week from now to get on the home delivery program. They can go somewhere right now and get the water that they need today. And over 90% of that water that's been given out there has been donated by Nestle Waters. So I have a couple photos up here being worth 1,000 words apiece of some of the donations from Nestle. I realize this may not look like a whole lot when you consider the fact that this is a 20,000 square foot storage space and some of these pallets are stacked 10 deep. They've donated over 340 pallets of water over the last, I believe it's 10 months. To give you some perspective, we couldn't get this all in one shot or even two shots, and I'm pretty sure that risk management and a few other folks would have had my hide had I let staff do what they wanted to do to actually get you those pictures. So again, I just wanted to give you kind of a picture of the enormity of what's been donated here. Over 340 pallets, including donations that are coming in as we speak, for a value of over $50,000. Nestle has really stepped up and has really helped us develop a solid supply chain. It has also helped the county be able to undertake additional response efforts without creating a larger fiscal impact here for the county. The $50,000 of donations actually becomes our local match on $150,000 of county expenses. So that gives us a net county cost of zero for up to $150,000 of expenses, which allows us to do more with the same amount of money. So again, I really would like to thank Nestle, and I'm sure the proclamation verbiage and the board will have additional comments. I'm going to sit down and yield the rest of the time here to Mr. Donaldson from Nestle. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. Thanks, Mr. Chairman, Board of Supervisors, and the County Council. On behalf of the 7,000 Nestle employees who live and work in California, we appreciate receiving this proclamation today. We'd like to recognize the dedicated men and women in Tulare County who have been instrumental in helping make sure water gets to communities and residents in need. Our California roots run deep, and we really care about our neighbors in Tulare County. We are honored to be part of this community and contribute where we can. Thank you very much.
As I was thinking about Andrew's presentation, and this is a great opportunity to honor Nestle Waters for their great contribution to Tulare County, knowing that this is just the very tip of the iceberg. And I think when we look back over the years at the great drought of 2015, we will look back and in many ways see this to be our finest hour. And I say that because of the neighbors who have helped one another, extending their garden hoses over to their neighbors' properties so that people can continue to have water. And that's at the very bottom of but very important part of helping one another all the way through Tulare County and the nonprofit organizations and the for-profit organizations. The state of California has stepped up and been very, very helpful in this regard. And so, when you're without water, you've got an emergency. Anybody who's been there knows what that's like. And it always happens at the worst time, right? I was up visiting my daughter-in-law as she was giving birth to our first granddaughter. I get a phone call from my mom, the well's gone dry. And so I rushed home and Not that I could do anything about it, but that's you know, it is a very difficult thing when it happens, and so we're very appreciative for those who step up to help. But right now, I want to focus on honoring Nestle Waters for its continued support of Tulare County's emergency relief efforts. Whereas Tulare County has been in a state of emergency since February 2014 due to California's record-breaking drought, leaving thousands of county residents without running water. And whereas Tulare County and its nonprofit agency stepped in to provide drought relief to the afflicted residents with the help of donations made by bottled water suppliers like Nestle Waters North America. Nestle Waters is committed through its Good Neighbor policy to giving back to the communities in which their employees, neighbors, and customers live and work. And whereas Nestle Water recognized the need for bottled drinking water in Tulare County and has generously donated over 12,000 cases of bottled water to the Tulare County Office of Emergency Services beginning in November 2014 and continuing through September 2015 for distribution to residents in need. And just a brief break there, the concept of continuing giving is so important because obviously this is not a one-time thing. We've had a continuing need for water. Nestle has stepped up and recognized that. Whereas providing access to safe drinking water in communities affected by emergencies is vital to maintaining public health during a crisis, bottled water donated by Nestle Waters acts as a safety net and is the first line of defense against the drought emergency like the one the county is currently facing. And whereas the county has established an emergency bottled drinking water point of distribution located at the East Porterville Drought Resource Center to ensure residents have immediate access to the donated water in their most desperate time of need. All water distributed at this location to date has been donated, with a large majority provided by Nestle Waters. And whereas Tulare County is most appreciative of Nestle Waters for its generous, continued provision of bottled drinking water for residents suffering from the devastating effects of California's drought, now therefore be it resolved that the Tulare County Board of Supervisors does hereby honor Nestle Waters North America for its contributions to Tulare County's emergency drought relief efforts. Signed, Alan Ashita, Pete Vanderpool, Phil Cox, Steve Worthley, and Mike Guinness. Thank you very much, sir.
Thanks, Barry.
Next, we'll bring up item number 3, and it's a presentation on the 2015 Summer Night Lights program. Allison, good morning.
Good morning, Supervisors, Mr. Rousseau and Ms. Dale-Slane. I've given you intermittent reports throughout the summer about how the programming has been going, and less than a month ago, we ended our Summer Night Lights season, and I'm here today to share with you about the successes. So the goals, as a reminder of the Summer Night Lights program, is that the communities hold events one night a week for 4 to 8 weeks, that parks and community youth centers remain open from 5 to 10 p.m., that they target youth and families, that sites offer snacks, programming, and community resources, and of course that they be community-driven. The communities were 15 different sites and 18 different communities participating, and they were Alpa and Allensworth, Cutler, Rosie, Dinuba, Ducor, Early Mart, Exeter, Farmersville, Ivanhoe, Lindsay, London, Pixley, Porterville, Tipton, Tulare, Visalia, and Woodlake. Keeping in mind the first year we had Porterville, Visalia, and Farmersville. We're excited. Jobs were created through the Summer Night Lights program, working with the Workforce Investment Board, CSET, and CN Company. 22 youth workers were hired, each earning approximately $1,000 during the summer. So Summer Night Lights, what are they? Well, the events include movies, music, games, prizes, sports, bounce houses, dances, resource fairs, swimming, and water play, anything that would attract youth to come out and do something fun and give them a safe place to be. So now for the community reports. This picture was taken on the first night of Summer Night Lights, Woodlake. As you can see, it's a major pool party. So Alpa and Allensworth held 6 traditional Summer Night Lights events. They utilized the Loop Bus, once again, one community hosting 3 nights, the other 3 as well. It was completely community-driven. They also collaborated with the community of Early Mart to be able to provide 4 swim nights, with 2 hosted by Alpa and 2 hosted by Allensworth. Their attendance this year was 1,192. Cutler Rossi, they held 6 events. It was sponsored by Cutler Rossi Joint Union School District as well as the Christian Worship Center. And their attendance was a little up from last year, 1,328. Dinuba held 8 events. They actually asked to increase their events from 6 to 8. We said, sure. They also held their 3rd of July event at a different venue. And so when I show you the numbers on the next slide, just be prepared. They also continued their community farmers market. As a refresher and a reminder, they decided to launch the farmers market in conjunction with the Summer Night Lights, and it's been a success for them. So as you can see, their numbers increased greatly because the change of venue allowed them to basically triple their attendance for that particular event. Ducor held 4 events plus 2 swim nights and a total of 360 attended events. This is the first year for this particular community. And if you'll remember, Alpa and Allensworth had about 300 their first year. I'm very hopeful for Ducor.
Isn't that the entire population of Ducor?
Well, you know, the Ducor Telephone Company was actually out there helping representatives from their the company helping barbecue for the school. So that was really, I didn't even know there was a Ducor Telephone Company. But it was exciting to see their participation and support of the programming. Early Mart, this is their 2nd year for this summer, and they hosted 4 nights. And this is a partnership between the school district as well as the town council, and their numbers increased as well. I will say one of their events was low, very low, and they were disappointed, and so they're going to re-strategize on one of their events, and they're seeing success, which is exciting. Exeter, Farmersville, and Ivanhoe, they utilized the Loop Bus to transport youth from Farmersville and Ivanhoe to the Boys and Girls Club in Exeter. And it was the Boys and Girls Club in partnership with the Optimist Club. Now, this is the first year, and as you can see, last year they decided to keep within their clubhouse. This year they went out into the park, and as you can see, that resulted in an increased attendance. Lindsay, they utilized the McDermott Fieldhouse once again. A total of 6 nights were offered to youth in Lindsay, and 1,010 attended the events. I will say, though, just for background and explanation of the numbers, there was no free swim offered this year, and last year when they offered it, every night was filled to capacity, and then they switched nights from Friday to Thursday. So as you can see, their numbers reflect that change, and so they're rethinking how they're going to be hosting Summer Night Lights for next year, trying to figure out how to draw in more, but still a decent performance. London is new this year. It was a partnership with Proteus and the Hodges Community Center, as well as Citizens for a Better London. A total of 4 nights were offered, and over 653 attended all 4 events. Now, that's pretty astounding considering Lindsay had 1,000, right? It's really exciting. Pixley was a newcomer as well. A total of 4 nights were offered, and over 1,214 attended all 4 events. Porterville has been a consistent partner since this is their 5th year. They held 6 events and 4 free swim nights. Every night at the swimming was at capacity. And they also connected Summer Night Lights with the overall Porterville Step Up effort. So as you can see, year after year, Porterville is consistently increasing attendance. Everyone in their community knows about it. And the staff with Porterville Parks and Leisure really does their due diligence to make sure they're providing innovative and programming is innovated, as well as that youth will want to attend. Tipton is new. Now, as you can see, they only held 3 nights. We made an exception because we really, really wanted to see if we could get them on board. And after the 3 nights, they said we want to do at least 4 next year. So we're really excited about that. And 526 attended their events. Tulare, 4 events were held. They held movies in the parks. It was a partnership between the Boys and Girls Club and the City of Tulare. And this is the 2nd year they've held the events in the park, and as you can see, they've gone away from their little clubhouse and out into the community, and it's had its reward. Visalia held 6 events at the Whitman Center, as well as 6 dive-in movie nights at Mount Whitney Pool, and this is a partnership with Proteus and the city of Visalia. And their attendance is a little lower. I will say one of their free swim nights, they had to call it off halfway through the night because of lightning strikes. So they sent everybody home, but all in all, they did well this year. Woodlake, once again, a partnership with the city of Woodlake. This is their 3rd year. They held 6 regular nights and 5 swim nights. By the way, all Summer Night Lights events in Woodlake are held at the pool. So it's just phenomenal to go and see all the heads bobbing in the water. This year, 3,878 attended their events. So just to give you a snapshot, the total attendance, I was really hoping we'd push over the 28,000, but dang it. We made it 27,831. Attendance since year 1, as you can see, it's on the incline. I don't know if we can sustain the continued growth, but I'm crossing my fingers. This is a snapshot as a pie chart of the communities, just kind of where they fit in as far as attendance, with Dinuba being, of course, the largest, and then Woodlake, and then Porterville, and other communities following. And then, of course, we broke it down by district. Supervisor Worthley, your district loves Summer Night Lights. And then, of course, it was really interesting to see the bump in District 2. Almost every community within District 2 is now a participant in the program. So I'm really excited about that. So it's really neat to see. And, of course, the consistent attendance in the other districts. So the outcomes, attendance obviously exceeded expectations. There were 95 separate events. So anytime during the summer, so how many days is summer, right? 95 different opportunities for families to be a part of something in their community that was safe and fun. Free swim nights and dive-in movie nights were a success, with 14% of the total attendance being a swim night. We created 22 jobs for youth, and we're reaching both incorporated and unincorporated communities, with the lion's share in the success going to those communities who actually don't have that Parks and Rec department to run programming. It's purely volunteer-based. And of course, we couldn't make it possible without the volunteers and the community resources that make it possible. They're too numerous to name. Various county departments were there to hand out resources with HHSA, as well as the Sheriff's Department, their volunteers, probation, sitting officers. It was quite an experience this summer and a success. So with that, I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions or comments by board members?
One quick comment, if I can. Two things I'd like to highlight that got run over really quickly because we have a lot of presentations today. 22 jobs were created for youth because of this program, which is great. So 22 people earned about $1,000 this summer working at these, as well as working with their whoever their boss was at those events. They worked other times as well as during the Summer Night Lights events. And I just think it's been great. If you think about something she said also, most of these communities do not have recreation departments. Your larger cities have recreation departments. They have regular summer activities that they work on. They're probably starting right now on next year's summer activities. So this is a boon for these communities that have no athletic departments, no recreation departments. This is something that kind of fills in a void for those folks. To see 1,000 people from these smaller communities come out and participate in these events is pretty exciting. So,
and if
job
I can,
well done, Allison.
Thank you. And I just want to say one thing. When we went to I think it was the second night for Tipton, the Tipton Beautification Committee was the lead of it. And when I walked up, there were over 30 volunteers there. And one of the gentlemen said, something like this, it helps put Tipton back on the map. And I thought that was a sweet, basically, sentiment, in that they realized and recognized the importance of this, and that they value this program for their community, because it means that you guys, they exist, and they know that they are important to you. So thank you so much.
Pleasure, man.
And just one quick comment, too, that I would throw in. I know that you do a great job coordinating each of the different communities, Allison, but you can definitely, I think those communities that either went away from certain strategies they had implemented in the past or are new to the program, there's a definite roadmap for success in the different communities that are doing the right things and getting the type of attendance out of their community that we're hoping to see. So I know you continue to work with them, and I think that that's a big reason why there is that upward trend and that incline. So great job, good work, and I'll see if we can come up with more communities in District 2 to hopefully implement these events. Thanks.
Thank you. Supervisor Rennes?
I was real pleased to see Ducor on this program this year. You know, you talk about the Ducor phone company. That is the phone company in Kennedy Meadows too. They operate both communities, but and also Ducor. Ted Smolly can attest to this. Has a 5-star restaurant, the Dutch Frontier. So Ducor's a little community, but it's got a lot going for it out there. But good work, good job, and keep up the good work. Thank you.
Supervisor Sheeta?
I think as we mature in the Step Up program and looking at Lindsay, there will be some changes because we do not have things that are cookie cutter for everybody, and I think each community really develops their own program, which I think is a great benefit of Step Up. Thank you for your presentation.
Well, as the #1 district, 2 years running, I just want to say, I mean, as great as it is, the program in the cities, I think particularly in our unincorporated communities, it's exciting because, as was said by Supervisor Cox, and you mentioned it too, most of our cities have got programs, they've got things for kids to do. And you got in these unincorporated communities, and frankly, there's no theater, there's no restaurants, there's no athletic facilities. Oftentimes, they don't have much of anything. And so this is really a wonderful program for those communities because they don't really have any options. I mean, there are very few options. So I'm real excited about the numbers, and I'm not surprised to see that they're high relative to the size of the population of those communities because, again, there's a hunger out there for this sort of thing, and we're meeting that. So thank you for your good efforts. Thank you for the grandfather of Step Up program, Supervisor Cox.
I'm getting older now.
Thank you very much.
Very good. Thank you. Our next item is public comments. Anyone wishing to address the board on matters which are within our jurisdiction but not on today's agenda, I will welcome them forward at this time and give us their name and address.
I have someone take these up to the board, please. My name is Jack Flores, Village Gardens, Porterville. As you can see, again, we have some pictures and also a petition directed to the Board of Supervisors. This petition is signed by 188 county residents of Village Gardens in Porterville, 5th District, and also are paying water customers of the city of Porterville. There are also 6 businesses included in this petition whose owners have also signed the petition. The petition reads as follows. The undersigned residents of Village Gardens, Porterville, hereby request that the Tulare County Board of Supervisors work with the Porterville City Council and that they jointly agree that they not use the Village Garden wells for the tank program. This petition is twofold. Discontinue taking water so our well can replenish. As you know, the last time I was up here, our wells went down twice within 30 days. Also, the second part of the petition is so our kids do not have to encounter these tanker trucks while they walk to the 3 bus stops in the neighborhood. We have all these kids walking back and forth, and we have these tanker trucks. Like I keep saying, fortunately, we're fortunate nothing has happened out there. We're very fortunate. We have little kids, kindergartners, all the way up to 8th graders out there. And they have to encounter these trucks in the morning, afternoon. You know, the board has the ability to direct the Porterville City Council to change the location for another water source and stop having these tankers come into our neighborhood and putting our kids, our grandkids at risk. Mission statement for the Tulare County Board of Supervisors are committed to serve their constituents with pride, innovation, and boldness to enhance the quality of life in Tulare County. We are asking the board, this board, to act on your commitment of pride, innovation, and boldness at this time and do what is right for us, your constituents. In closing, I'd like to say that the last well between us and Road 208, whose wells have failed. There's a well 176 yards from Village Gardens. It is failing. I spoke with the owners yesterday. They said their water is sputtering. They're getting sand out of their water in their well. 176 yards from Village Gardens. Our well system is the next in line. We need some help. Thank you.
All right. Anyone else wishing to address the board in this public comment period? Seeing no one, we will close the public comment period, and I'm going to take up the consent calendar at this time, items 6 through 34. Are there any issues which board members wish to speak to or handle separately? Anyone in the public wishing to address matters on the consent calendar this morning?
Motion to approve consent calendar.
Second.
We have a motion by Supervisor Cox, seconded by Supervisor Hennis. Please cast your votes. Votes unanimous. And we will now take up our timed item. Public hearing. Request from the Health and Human Services Agency to adopt fee increases for the Health and Human Services Agency Environmental Health Services Division effective upon approval by the Board of Supervisors. Good morning, Jason.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board, CEO, and County Council. We are here today to ask for an increase in our well permitting program. As you are aware, this board approved an increase in allocation of positions of 4 back in May 19th of this year. And I am happy to report that as of July, 3 of the 4 employees were able to be hired and have come on board and have begun training and working with the program. And as a result, we, even though they're still sort of in a training mode, we have been able to decrease application time, waiting time, to about 3 days for those individuals who submit completed applications. We get lots of incomplete applications, but it's the resources has also helped us do a better job in reaching the drillers, the homeowners, other people involved to get those applications completed so we can move them through the process. As a result, as you know, Environmental Health Services is a completely fee-supported department, and there is very minimal county dollar or realignment dollars, mostly as grant matching. So therefore, we have to now pay for these new people unfortunately, through an increase in the well permits. There are 5 types of well permits, as you see here on the slide. With our current fee and our proposed fee, basically it boils down to about $95 a permit. And we are still well under our neighbor to the north at $605. Fresno's at about $600 a permit. And so today we ask that the board conduct a public hearing and then to approve the fees at the requested $288 and $338. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Supervisor Ennis.
Yeah, Jason, when was the last time we looked at these rates, and how many years has it been since?
Well, we did a rate in our normal annual rate cycle in May. We did a 5% across the board, and that was the first time we had raised rates since 2008. And then we're just asking for a little increase in this program because of the new staff to process application. I do have to say that we have already issued 1,958 permits this year, which is an increase over last year. So the demand has yet to decrease. It's been a while.
Any other questions, Mr. Supervisor Vanderbilt?
Yeah, one of the questions I have, Jason, is how much of the cost is actually driven by the fact that we were paying overtime within the department because we did not have bodies to process the application load versus now we have those bodies and we're able to do it a little more efficiently. I just want to make sure that we're not prematurely increasing the fees when there are efficiencies yet to be gained by our new employees.
No, we've essentially the methodology we use is we sort of look at what are all the costs for a year to support that program, and then divide by the number of anticipated or last year's number of permits, and then we get a cost per permit. So that's really just sort of a basic math kind of way we do all of our fees. We're hoping that this is not too high of an increase. We feel comfortable that we're trying to gain all the efficiencies that we can, but this also allows us to do a much more quality job, because I do have to say, before bringing on the new folks, we were doing mostly desk reviews, and we weren't doing site visits. We weren't doing a lot of that. And as you know, that sort of has, so this will help us also improve the quality. So hope that answered your question, but that's kind of how we do it.
And just one quick follow-up. So if in some instance this is actually too high of a fee increase, say next year, is it possible that you'll be coming back with a fee decrease?
Every year, we're looking at our fees every year. Okay. And even that's a good question, because even as the demand begins to decrease, then on our yearly cycle, we'll be able to adjust the fees up or down depending on the cost of the program.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? I will simply say that this is, I think, the first time in my 17 years on the Board of Supervisors I actually had a well driller call me up and said, "Your fees are too low." I mean, that's unusual.
We've had amazing support. We've had support from the well drilling community to say, we really need some faster turnaround times. We need some help. So this is a way of addressing that request.
Entertain a motion.
Move approval.
Public hearing.
Oh, I'm sorry. Public hearing. Yep, thank you. Public hearing is open. Anyone wishing to address the board on this matter is invited to come forward this time. Give us your name and address. Seeing no, we'll close the public hearing and bring it back to the board for
Move
action.
approval.
Motion by Supervisor Ishida.
Second.
Second by Supervisor Innes. Please cast your votes. And the votes are unanimous. Thank you. And that will now take us, we're going to go out of, a little bit out of order here. We're waiting for the executive director from CSAC to appear, but he knew he would not be here until sometime after 10 o'clock. So we'll take up item number 36, which is a request from the Auditor Controller to approve the rate of taxation of the state and county for fiscal year 2015 and 16. Good morning, Rita. You're not going out the door, are you?
2 minutes, how's that? Good morning, Chairman Worthley, board members, CEO Rousseau, and Ms. Bells Lane, County Council. This is the time fixed by law for levying the rate of taxation for the state and county purposes for the fiscal year 2015-16. We recommend this board approve the rate of taxation of the state and county for the fiscal year be collected upon the taxable property of the County of Tulare, State of California, at the rate of $1 per $100 of assessed valuation, as shown on the attached schedule for the agenda item, and this is as allowed by law under Article 13 of the California Constitution and Revenue and Taxation Code sections 93 and 100. We further recommend that the board order the tax rates as shown on the attached schedules A, B, and C be levied and directed to be collected upon each $100 of assessed valuation of the taxable property of the several school districts and special districts of said county for raising the necessary amounts to pay the principal and interest on bonds and for special purposes of said districts as allowed by law under Article 13 of the California Constitution and Revenue and Taxation Codes 93 and 100. All of these tax rates have been approved by the voters of Tulare County through past ballot measures. Schedule D tax rates are approved by other governing board of supervisors in surrounding counties and are there for your information purposes. We further recommend that the board approve and accept the statement of valuation of the property of this county as compiled by the county auditor and filed with this board per Government Code Section 25254A. Last year's Last year's current tax rolls totaled $393 million in property taxes for all the schools, special districts, cities, and taxing agencies in the county. And that was based on about 29 billion assessed values. This year's total assessed values is about 30 billion we'll be collecting on. We won't know how much it is until we put these rates into the system, and sometime next week we'll have a total of how much we'll be collecting for the secured and unsecured rolls this year. So we're asking that you please approve these tax rates and the valuation reports. There are 5 new issues this year on the bonds, 2 in Early Mart, 1 in Tipton, 1 Visalia, and 1 Farmersville, and several of them have gone back and refinanced because of the lower interest rates to save money for the taxpayers this year. They've done a really good job, especially Visalia, on lowering what the taxpayers will have to pay back on the bonds that they have issued. So it's up to you.
Any questions of Rita?
I think it's great to see that the issuing agencies are always looking for ways to keep the costs down for taxpayers, because I know that when you get that property tax bill, you're not too happy with Tulare County, so it's good to see that. And with that, I know that this is an action item.
Yes.
Move for approval of this item if there's no comments from board members or members of the public.
Motion by Supervisors Vanderpool, second by Supervisor Cox. And I just was going to make one comment before we do vote, and that is, I think it's important for people to, as Supervisor Vanderpool pointed out, to recognize that so often we look at that bill and we say, wow, my taxes have gone up. What happened? And more often than not, it's associated with separate bond issues that people vote on, and sometimes they don't really understand what the consequences of voting for those bonds. There's a major concern about what we're doing going forward in terms of the indebtedness we're creating outside of our property tax structure, and it's growing because people are passing bond measures, and it's not that difficult to pass the bond measure for schools. It's like 50 plus 1% or 0.5% or whatever.
Yes.
The understanding that when I look at my bill, a very good size portion of it is paying on these bonds, and people need to. I think sometimes there's kind of a lack of understanding. Oh yeah, I'm all for this. I'm voting for it. And then they get their tax bill, and it's like, how did that happen? Well, you voted for the very thing that you're now opposed to or concerned about. So it's important to bring that thing to the awareness to people, because there is no free lunch, folks. At the end of the day, and when you vote for a bond increase or for bonds, you're going to vote to pay for them, and and you're going to be paying for it.
You sound like you've been in our office
yeah.
as we explain that.
All right. So the motion's been made, and we'll now vote, and the vote's unanimous. Thank you, Rita.
Thank you.
Will bring us to item number 37, approve sending a letter of support for AB 935, which defines 2 water conveyance projects in the San Joaquin Valley for potential funding. Good morning, Mrs. England.
This item was added at the request of Supervisor Ennis, and it's written as a letter of support for AB 935, which would fund 2 projects. One, though, benefits our region directly, and that is the Friant-Kern Pumpback project, and it's estimated to be between $7.5 million to $10 million for between 15,000 and 30,000 acre-feet annually. Since the time we agendized this, we've received several letters of opposed unless amended from mostly our neighbors to the north, but also Cuya Delta Water Conservation District is a signatory to one of those letters. And the concern from that group is that is where the money is supposed to come from. Initially, AB 935 indicated that the money would be allocated out of the Integrated Regional Water Management Planning funds that are set aside for DWR. The concern is that that would work around the competitive process, and that language has since been struck, but it still just says that DWR shall provide the money, and so the concern is still where is the money supposed to come from. So you have those letters of opposed unless amended, as well as the letter of support.
Questions or comments, Supervisor Ennis? Was it
No, I just thought it was a good thing because we've been so reliant upon well water, and this is a way to get some of that, especially that San Joaquin River settlement water back. So that was my thinking on this. Anything we can do, and getting it passed is the next thing. It seems like every time there's a bill that goes up there that people want to support, it gets shot down by Northern and Southern California. So, but this has some good elements in it. No, nothing's perfect, but I think it's a way, hopefully, to get some of that San Joaquin settlement water back.
I think the project is extremely good, and I guess I'd rather sort of support the measure, worry about how it's going to be funded later. But if we don't go forward with this project, we don't have to worry about how it's going to be funded because there won't be any project. That's right. Any other questions or comments?
Any public comment?
Yes, or anybody in the public wish to speak to this matter? Good morning.
My name is Laura Brown. I work for California Citrus Mutual doing government relations, and we were very actively involved in the bond process and the negotiations. And I thank Supervisor Enos for his support with this item and reminding the group that there is a direct correlation between the Bureau of Reclamation and what they're proposing to do to recapture flows from the San Joaquin River Restoration Project. This is a very positive bill. The legislature has supported it through all bipartisan parties, and it's creating flexibility in our ability to move water throughout the state in a way that we haven't seen, especially because surface water is so crucial at this time. And it's also going to capture a lot of the flows that we're losing that are going through the Delta and then out through the Pacific Ocean. It has gone through a transparent legislative process with, again, significant support. And the original legislation, actually, we were considering a much higher bill on this project. And as the groups have come together and found these two options, even with the two projects, it's going to be significantly under budget, between $60 and $70 million, which is significantly less than the $200 million price tag that we were looking at prior. I know that there is opposition. I'm in communication with a lot of those individuals that are writing letters of opposition. Unfortunately, there is a concern as to exactly where that funding will come from. We had the speaker, Tony Atkins, in the Valley here last week, and she confirmed, as she said last year, that the purpose of the funding was to have it come from a separate pot of money. It isn't intended to come from within the water bond funding. And I know that it's a lot of politics, as I'm sure everyone in this room appreciates, as we go forward in creating that money, but it wasn't intended to take money out from that pot. And actually, that pot of money isn't even sufficient to meet this project's needs. So the governor, the administration, and the legislature are working very hard on that this week. And obviously, this particular county would be well served in having projects like this put into place.
It would seem to me that it would be logical for this to be funded out of the overall effort aimed at the Delta, because the reason for the need of this project is because of putting more water through the Delta and then trying to recapture some of that and I guess send it down to California Aqueduct and then pick it back up and bring it back up to the Bryant Current Canal. So it really is related to a project, to an overall project of trying to improve the Delta water conditions. Yes, Supervisor.
A couple comments. I actually just found it very funny that you called the state legislative process transparent. It's got to be the first time I've ever heard that. But I will say, too, that I do know that I read an article yesterday that said that Governor Brown is going back to the drawing boards to look at potentially another water bond coming up on the ballot to address the items that were not covered in the water bond that was passed. And so who knows, maybe that could be a potential funding source, but it seems like it's going to be primarily an environmentalist-driven bond to take care of more environmental projects that were not addressed in the last bond. But anyways, thank you for your comments. I appreciate it.
Any other comments, questions? Supervisor Rashida?
I'd like to commend Assemblyman Salas. He's been with us working very hard to secure our water, surface water, in the San Joaquin Valley. And I hate to see Henry Perea being termed out also from the Assembly But it shows that the younger Democrats in the legislature are willing to work across party lines to get things done. So my hat's off to Riddy.
Your support of this, I take it.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Any other folks from the audience wish to speak to this matter? Back to the
Mr.
board.
Chair, I move for approval of this item.
Second.
Further.
Motion by Supervisor Vanderpool, seconded by Supervisor Ennis. Please cast your votes. Votes are unanimous. And we'll take us then to presentation given by the Tulare County Association of Governments regarding a report on the Tulare County Regional Transportation Impact Fee. Morning, Ted.
All right. Ted Smollett, Director of Tulare County Association of Governments.
Hey, Teddy, would you pull that microphone closer to your mouth? There.
Scoot closer to me.
No, just pull it closer to your mouth so you're actually talking into it and not to the computer.
All right. Are we okay? At TCAG, we don't have fancy things. All right. So, we're here today as a result, as all of you know, when the county approved the general plan, TCAG was asked by the county and the cities to look at the concept of a potential transportation impact fee. I want to talk about, though, just real quickly, why in the world do we even have to get in a position to talk about an impact fee? And first of all, I'll go back to 2006. We approved Measure R. It's been an incredible success. We've had some incredible projects that have been done already, and we're not done. As some of you know, some of you call me weekly and checking on status of projects, but that's good. And we're going to keep going, and we're going to keep having successes. But even in 2006, when we put Measure R together, we left projects off. The reality is there was only so much Measure R can do. Every project that literally is under consideration of the TIF was a project we consciously could not put on there because of the cost. The other item I would note is, you sort of touched on it earlier, is the idea of where is state funding at. And the reality is, and I totally agree, believe me, I wish the late fees were back. To put in perspective, it costs us $4 million a year. And that's probably low, because I like to estimate low, as most of you know. And so since the late fees have been diverted, for whatever that is, 2 or 3 years, that's cost us $12 million. Over the life of Measure R, that would be the equivalent of building 2 interchanges, is what that. So one of the things that we always hope to do is see things quit being diverted. I use this as an example to staff to tell them why there's no credibility of government. They need to be like, quite frankly, what we do with Measure R. We told the public, here's what you approved, and we're going to deliver what we told you we're going to approve, and we're not going to play games with it. If the state would do that, there'd probably be a lot more support for things. That's my editorial. But when it comes to transportation, even with the late fees putting back, even with the loans being paid back, and again, for every billion, roughly, it just depends how it comes in, it's probably $4 million to our county. So you can figure what they're costing us in the STIP and the buying power. So if it's 10 years old, it's probably worth $7 million, because if it had been there. But having said all that, we still, quite frankly, do not even come close to having the money we need in the state or in this county. 2 of the things that I would note really contribute to that issue in California, one of them is the fact that we do have the greatest dairy area, greatest agricultural area in the whole world. Years ago, and I just don't know the current numbers, Texas was number 2 at $18 billion, and we were number 1 in the valley at $25 billion. And I know those are only going up. Recently, Tulare County is the number 1 ag county in the country. People want that. The other issue that we deal with in California that no one has in the United States is we by far have more port traffic than any place else in the United States. We dwarf the other states. It's not even close. I think 60% of all port traffic goes to our California ports. So all the rest of the 40% are divided up. So I just use that as introducing here some of the issues that lead us to, which one? All right. There we go. So a couple of things. This fee, by the way, would not be necessary if there wasn't development. Now, I'm not, TCAG's not against development, but the need for this is because there's growth. And the amount of fee that we're talking about is the concept or idea. I know my good friend right behind me, Mr. Lane, will speak in a bit. The idea is to have the building industry pay a fair share. And I realize that's always a fun term to define. But the idea is the building industry is going to build. The impacts of building, the impacts of added traffic result in a challenge, and we have to build these projects. If there wasn't a cause by new development, then we couldn't have that as a project as part of our TIF. So one of the things that you'll see here is looking at a fee in which the development industry will pay a portion, and I want to say that very clearly, a portion. They would not be paying in any case all of the cost of projects. So one of the things that's happened over time is looking at the TIF. We spent over 2 years on this, and let me just cut to the chase on this next slide. We've done a number of traffic studies, and what the traffic study does is give us the legal limit we can charge for a fee. And with your permission, I'm just going to stick to the single family rate so it allows us to do a comparison. The traffic study shows that we legally would have the ability to charge $3,600 a unit countywide. And that is the absolute ceiling. Once the traffic study was done, we had a set of meetings with TCAG, and we compared to other areas and including meeting with the BIA. It was clear that this amount was too high. One of the things that we did is we looked at our neighboring counties, and you do have to be careful, apples to oranges, when comparing what a TIF really means in other areas. But specifically San Joaquin and Merced and Fresno. And the two northern ones are very high. They're in the $3,000 or $4,000 range. We would be fine in comparison to that. But Fresno's is $1,900. And Fresno's TIF is a regional TIF. It is very similar to what we're proposing because theirs was required as part of their measure, and it's for state highways only. Very similar to the TIF that is under concept study by TCAG. So we said, all right, our next starting point was to cut this in half. And then there was quite a bit of discussion about small cities and where the location of these projects were and how do you potentially charge cities versus bigger cities. So we came up with a concept, and that's the far right column, that we would further have a reduction for the 5 small cities to pay a fourth of the amount as compared to Porterville, Visalia, and Tulare, where a project is directly within their jurisdiction. Now, I will remind everyone as I use those terms that we benefit regionally from all the projects. We had this discussion at Woodlake, and I said, you know, we have the largest agricultural economy of any county, and that means that the agricultural economy doesn't stop and start in one spot. They need all these facilities. They need the 99 corridor to be effective. So these corridors affect us all, some more directly than indirectly, but they all have a benefit to us. Then the challenge, and one of the items of discussion I'll come back to, is what to do with the county. Right now, what was shown is the county in the smaller category, and we've certainly had some robust discussions from the city of where the county should be placed, whether they should be in the so-called 25% or the $1,800 amount. So this just gives you examples. This is the higher fee, and then here is the lower fee, which would be for the small cities. One of the other items we've put in front of especially the small cities, although it wouldn't be limited, is this idea of a 10% return to source for complete streets and what I would call projects that are more minor in nature. So in other words, they're not necessarily big freeway projects, but they would allow the agency to be able to choose to add an additional amount to a regional TIF, and all that money would come right back to them and would allow them with a plan to complete streets of sidewalks and things of that nature. And this has been done in other counties. So this is not something new. We would not be treading new water. It also, and what I've explained to small cities is you turn around and use this for leverage. You don't use this to fully fund anything. It becomes seed money so that you can go after other dollars. And finally, what we've had to do is reduce the amount of corridors that from what we're eligible to 4 key corridors. 99, 198, 190, and I would say preliminary phases of 137. And here's the project list. And on the far right side is approximately where we're at now. There are further refinements to be done, but the refinements actually take a lot of time and energy, and we haven't done that yet until we get the concept approved. But there would be further refinements to these projects. So as you can see, a significant investments needed for part of 99, 198, 190, and then there would be some money for 137 to do the preliminary phases. The thought there is if there is a Measure R2, then although this sounds crazy, in 2037, when one of my staff takes over TCAG, they would be able to fund start the next projects.
Supervisor Cox wanted to ask you a question.
Real quick, looking at these numbers, this 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, how many years for these projections?
This is 20 years of a TIF.
Thank you.
That's a good point. I don't think we've brought that up. One of the things I would note is because we've cut the TIF in half, if you will, and trying to reduce the fee, that means, for instance, 99 from the county line to 190 would not move forward. So you can see a number of these other projects. And what we did is, based on the board's collective comments at TCAG, I don't know there was unanimity on anything, is to look at those projects that clearly were going to be at level service F and sooner than later. So some projects were projected maybe in the future to get the level service F. And then, quite frankly, some are just super expensive. And we only could do so many projects. We also had to look at what was the realistic leverage we could get. Similar to Measure R, we did not want to present to the TCAG board or in turn the cities and the county a leverage that simply wasn't realistic. And so we tried to be very careful what we assume what kind of leverage that we could do. There's a finite amount of leverage. And next is, this shows you how we've had to reduce the projects to core areas. So the left side, if you're looking this way, is shows what the TIF would have allowed at 3,800 per dwelling unit. The right side shows how we've had to reduce that. And you can see one of the prime things is that benefits us all is 99 and getting 99 extended down past the city of Tulare to 190. And I think that's probably one of our big critical spots. 198 is projected in the general plan to be a level service F on 99 all the way to the easterly city limits. And 190, we've worked with them, and we have a corridor study that identifies about $300 million worth of projects on that corridor. So what happened at our last meeting, we presented this idea of a reduced TIF and then a further reduced TIF for small cities, and the board directed us to go out and present to the county and all the cities so that September 21st there could be an action item to either move forward or to stop work on the TIF. And we have spent work for the past 2 years on this. So one of the things I would note is we have done a few of the presentations already, and some of the cities would like to see a consideration of just a fee for dwelling units only. This is a theme that's happened for small cities. They are not in support of a DIF fee for any commercial or industrial. Now, I'm only relaying things that we've comments. We have not necessarily done analysis. We have asked council to review that. Our consultant that's doing our TIF is researching. He has not heard of that being done anywhere. And like I said, legal counsel is reviewing the legality of that. Now, what that would do is we'd still be limited to just what the attributed growth is for that housing. So we would have to come up with more leveraging, and we'd probably have to reduce slightly the projects. Hopefully that makes sense. So in other words, if I'll round it to simple millions, if the amount of TIF that could be collected with homes was $1 million, and we only did a TIF for homes, it still can only be $1 million. You can't turn around and increase the impacts of those dwelling units. The other item is discussion about the county of Tulare. And should the county be treated like a small city, or should the county be treated as one of the 3 big cities? And I think part of that may be able to have a solution. We just haven't had a chance to go to our board and talk about this, that you deal with it more about potential growth in the county that's close proximity to one of the major cities, as opposed to a community that may be in a rural area that may function more like a rural community as opposed to functioning as part of a big city. But that has not been vetted out. So I'm putting all the cards on the table, if you will. And so that leaves us where we're at today. And I would just note this, if we don't find a way, and this would be my challenge to the BIA, and it's been great to work with Mike. Very practical in having discussions. I'm not saying he's going to support the TIF, but I am saying the conversation is very professional. If we don't find money here, we are going to have to figure out what to do someplace else, because we are heading towards significant traffic congestion in our county. And so I don't want to say that, but I need to, as your director, to make sure you know that we are doing things to prepare for that congestion. So now I'm happy to answer any questions.
Supervisor Ennis?
What kind of feedback have you been getting from the presentations of different cities?
Well, Woodlake and Exeter were the exact same. They were, I'm not going to say anyone is happy about a TIF. Okay, no one's jumping up, yes. But their answer was the same or similar. Want to see it on dwelling units only, and the county to pay a higher rate, to be treated as 3 biggest cities. The city of Visalia.
They said they wanted the county to pay a higher rate.
The county be treated like the 3 largest cities.
Same as the 3 bigger cities. Yeah.
The city of Visalia was probably more strong about the county paying at a higher rate. And I think again, we haven't sat down and had this discussion. I think if something was done to look at where that potential growth would be. So in other words, if the county did a development in Goshen versus, choose a community, Alpa, is there a difference in that and how they function and the impacts? So that's why I think there may be room there on that discussion. But nevertheless, that was Visalia's biggest comment, was they wanted to see the county pay higher rates.
Do you want to say that?
Yeah, the question is why? What's the justification? What do you believe the cities are? Why do you think the cities are asking for?
If you take Visalia for example, and the county develops right on the other side of the line, then you pay a lower fee, and it becomes non-competitive, yet you're right there next to the city.
Chairman?
Yes, Supervisor.
I didn't get. There's one other city. The city of Lindsay, unfortunately, we went on the wrong day, and so I'm not sure where they stand. We went on a day, okay, you know the meeting. So we got up and presented, and their minds, unfortunately, are someplace else. So I didn't want you to think I wasn't reporting on Lindsay. It just, unfortunately, they had other things to deal with.
When we look at the growth in Tulare County in the last census, 90% of the growth went to the incorporated cities. And the question I have, too, is that how many of the cities have impact fees?
Someone help me. Visalia has impact fees. Visalia, Tulare.
Well, I'm talking about new building impact fees.
Dinuba does.
I think every city has impact fees.
Or traffic.
I think Exeter does.
Exeter has
I think
fees.
most cities have
You're right.
traffic.
They don't have impact.
Yeah, that's a good one. Is there a difference between overall fees and whether they have a traffic
There's
impact
park
fee?
fees. There's all kinds of additional impact.
Yeah, well, those are basically impact fees.
Yes.
At like for instance, City of Porterville doesn't have building impact fees, but they have traffic.
The reason I was asking that question, I was trying to get to the point of what are the cumulative impact fees in those incorporated cities that are now on the books, because that has an impact if we put a regional impact fee on top of those fees. For instance, Marin County, the impact fees for a new building is $200,000. Livingston is somewhere like $130,000 in impact fees to build a house. So,
And they wonder why they can't build affordable housing.
Right. Mike?
May I address that question?
Yes. Go ahead.
Visayas impact fee, development impact fees total now, and you have to add some in for Cal Water because they're the water purveyors, about $15,500 per single family residence.
That's not including the school impact fees.
Doesn't include schools. Yeah. City of Tulare is about $13,000 plus, and Porterville's is around $8,000, depending on the location in town. So that's the order of magnitude. That
Dinuba's crazy. It's like
28,000. Dinuba.
Number one district for sure.
I was negligent to mention one other point that we've been bringing up, if I may, Mr. Chair. That is also, if we don't have some sort of solution, Measure R has been able to help us deal with what I would call comment letters from Caltrans on development. As we move forward, if we don't have a regional plan that shows how we're dealing with these, then all the individual development will be getting fair share contribution letters, and our ability to help and deal with those is very, very tough when it's handled on that kind of case. So, anyhow.
I've got a couple of questions and comments. First of all, how many Valley counties have a TIF program and also have a self-help measure?
Fresno and San Joaquin.
Out of the 8?
Well, only 4 of us have a
self-help.
Our self-help. Okay. So we would be the third. Yeah.
You'd be the third. Okay. And who made the decision to take 99 widening from 190 to County Line off the table for the lower fee?
Well, I guess I did.
Okay.
I don't. Well, what happened was I got.
Well, yeah, no, and I'm not being critical. I'm not putting you up on the firing squad or anything. But I mean, because my question about that specifically really does affect the south part of the county and the potential for growth, for industrial growth in south of Highway 190, and that's a very significant distance of our county that's not going to have a widened state highway. So I would ask that question. And then, another way that I wanted to look at this or potentially ask about is has there been any thought given to obviously Measure R2 or maybe another self-help measure on top of Measure R that might have a higher, instead of it being a half-cent sales tax, maybe it's a full cent sales tax. And the reason I ask that question is because, there's 450,000 people in Tulare County right now, and obviously Tulare County is going to grow. But a sales tax increase is going to be something where everyone who uses the system is paying into these improvements, rather than just burdening new growth and burdening residential development and commercial development, which we know is very important to our economy in order to diversify our county in terms of employment base and everything else. So, just
on your first question, we technically assume a Measure R2 in our regional transportation plan.
Okay.
But that doesn't start till 2037. All of these remaining projects will be at a level service F many years beforehand. The second part's a little more complicated. I have not brought the item to the board only because I'm watching my neighbors looking at companion or parallel bills, and they're not pulling even close to being okay. I mean, and then if you've noticed, LA has finally passed another parallel one, but it was a very challenging deal. San Joaquin does have this in our RTP to do a parallel transportation bill.
What you mean by that is that instead of waiting until this Measure R actually expires, that we actually have another one going on top of that.
Right, and I would tell you, it just doesn't seem realistic in the cards. It's those type of things aren't pulling well. And to be fair, we haven't pulled, but it's $20,000 to do one of those.
How much are we spending on this study for the
a lot.
TIF?
Which one?
I thought I would ask.
Yeah, I have two comments. One is I forgot to congratulate you, Ted, on doing a great job. I always refer to you as Mrs. Measure R and Cox as Mr. Measure R.
Well, you know how to
wrote the
respond
plan.
to that one.
Congratulations. The county's in much better shape because of the plan.
I object.
Okay. Lastly, it's frustrating. I echo Supervisor Vanderpool's comments about that portion of 99 being taken off that list, because we've gone back and forth with and not necessarily you, but with my city manager counterparts on that segment. So it's unfortunate. The large cities want us to pay the same fee as they do, when, from my perspective, the regional projects are really arterials between cities. So anyway, I just want to make that comment.
Yes, go ahead, Chip.
On your point about 99, I think one of the things that if we got far enough, and we don't dive into this, there would probably be a priority contingency list. The questions have been asked, well, Ted, are you guys going to quit trying to leverage? Of course not. So we're not giving up our other efforts to get 99. So that's a possibility. I can't in good faith put something up there that there's no way to fund it.
Chair?
Yes.
This will be the final for me. A couple things. I've heard, quote, the county is imposing a transportation impact fee. That is not true. I've heard that on the radio. I've seen that in print. That is not the truth. Mr. Vanderpool, you get to do Measure R2, not me. Something that I've heard as I've attended a couple of city council meetings is this theme, well, let's just look at residential. Well, if you think about the two maps that Ted had up there, the before we started whittling and the after we started whittling, the third map would be a line about that long. So at some point, we need to decide, when is enough? When have we spent enough money on these studies, and when have we spent enough time trying to sell this to an audience that's not going to buy it? And I don't think we have an audience that is going to buy it, neither on this board nor on any of the city councils. So at some time, we need to be willing and have the courage to say, enough is enough, let's stop. It's not going to pass. We've been doing this long enough. When I asked the city of Woodlake if Rite Aid would have paid another $28,000 in impact fees for their 14,000 square foot store that they're building in Woodlake, every head on that council shook no. So the housing Although it does have the potential to push some buyers out of the market, you add a couple $1,000s on a house, and it very well could disqualify a buyer from qualifying for that house. For me, the big piece is the commercial on this, the industrial. We're talking about little numbers. You talk about a 14,000 square foot store in Woodlake, $28,000 would probably have pushed that store over the edge. So at some point, someone's got to have the courage to say, you know what, I recognize this is not going to pass, or we're not going to get to where we need to be. We're doing all this for 1.5 miles of some road somewhere to be expanded.
20 years from now.
20 years from now. If you look at those percentages, some of those percentages that are estimated for this TIF to cover are 80 and 90%. So those monies wouldn't be collected in enough time. For me, I think we're going to be at level F way before we get enough money in the pot to even do one of these projects. So just my 2 cents worth from what I felt at a couple of city council meetings I went to, from what I've heard, no one's had the courage yet to say, you know what, enough is enough. We just need to stop right now. If one of the larger cities, the county, 3 of the smaller cities said that, then we could move on with our life. There is more than one way to skin the cat. There are other ways we can look at doing this, but this way obviously is not working because there's still so much animosity between the cities and the county, the cities and the cities competing with each other, that I don't think we're going anywhere with this. I'm done.
I appreciate that, because I was going to say we should have a memorial service for this.
Mr. Chairman.
That was a joke. Yes, Mr.
For Ted?
Not for Ted, for the TIF.
I really think the city's resistance to impact fees is really short-sighted. When I left Fresno in 1986, we had about 140,000 people. Now it's 500,000. I don't think Tulare County residents understand, like Visalia, once you reach 100,000 population, your population acceleration is substantial. And I could see Visalia being 200,000, 250,000 people at least in 20 years. And the way the city of Visalia is situated, I'm really concerned about the circulation issues that the city of Visalia will have, because I can see it in Fresno when you have 3 major freeways going through the city, and Visalia has 1.
Actually, 4.
Well, but Visalia has 1. I look at Ben Maddox, and I look at Lover's Lane. I saw Lover's Lane was up there. Those are absolutely nightmares. How are you going to move these people we have a lot of cross streets going over the freeway, but they're not enough for a population that's going to double itself in 20 years. I look at the city of Tulare. Tulare needs more grade separations, because I believe there's going to be a lot more commerce on that rail line. So there's a lot of need there that you're not going to be able to fund overnight. And you need to plan for the future instead of saying, well, the county's not paying enough or whatever. I agree with Supervisor Cox about this industrial and commercial impact fees look pretty high to me. And I think we could do work there. But I think it's really short-sighted of our major cities, especially on the 99 off 99 quarter, to discount going forward on impact fees.
I have spoken at various TCAG board meetings on this matter, and I think Ted knows my sentiment about it, is that I struggle with the whole concept of, to get to the very basis of it, the issue is growth causes impacts on transportation. And in much of this rural part of Tulare County, unlike a city where you have continually kind of additional growth and add on, in many cases in the county, one house is torn down, another one gets built, or 3 get torn down and 1 gets built. So you don't necessarily have this kind of growth that you see in urbanized type of settings. When I think about most of our urbanized growth in the county, then we're talking about our unincorporated communities, which also happen to be our disadvantaged communities, which means that these are the poorest people who live in Tulare County for the most part. And we would be asking them to pay what people would pay in the more affluent communities. So I really struggle with this. It's 20 years out. It's very speculative in terms of right now we don't know what the way forward would be. But if you went back 20 years, we didn't have a Measure R. We didn't know what the way forward was going to be 20 years ago because we didn't have a Measure R. We didn't have Proposition 1B that funded a big part of the 99. And all of a sudden it came up. We were looking at impact fees for the needs of Tulare County because we needed to build a new jail. And then the state came back and says, here's $60 million, build a new jail. These are the kind of things you don't know what's coming forward in the future. And to saddle people with these incurring these costs today for something which may be necessary 20 years from now, I struggle with that because we just don't know what's going to happen. We don't know if people are going to be in cars. If you talk about the way people are talking in Sacramento, they want everybody to be out of their cars in 20 years, so you won't even be riding in a car. So I really question how we can make these kind of long-range plans and start incurring these costs today for something which is very speculative. And really, the bigger concern for me from a county supervisor standpoint is maintenance. What we're lacking is maintenance dollars. Even with the 35% we get from Measure R and the funds that we are receiving, we're going backwards in terms of maintaining the road systems that we have, much less expanding. And by the way, when you expand the road system from 2 lanes to 4 lanes, look at the long-term maintenance responsibilities you're putting back on the county to maintain 4 lanes instead of 2 lanes. These are big bills in the future. So I'm opposed to the TIF. I'm glad to give it a burial, be done with it. I appreciate what Supervisor Ishida is saying, but we also have things like when developers do development, they don't get off scot-free on transportation. They have to negotiate with Caltrans. They have to negotiate with cities. They have to give up right-of-way. They have to pay for improvements for their impacts on transportation. So it's not like this is a zero-sum game. Business is still in the path, and development does also in terms of housing. Housing development requires oftentimes expansion of existing road systems, and they pay for that. So I personally am opposed to the TIF. I think we should just go on and spend our time in more productive ways. And that's one supervisor's opinion.
I want to respond to that.
Go ahead.
The reason I'm looking at is, as the cities, if you do not have a regional fund for regional projects, because the cities are going to increase their impact fees. They're going to negotiate impact fees for that new development. And all that money is going to sit right there in the pocket of the cities without addressing the impact on regional transportation that cities bring or population brings. So you have to have some way to impact regional impacts of the growth of cities. And you've got 90% of the growth in the cities, and we have very little growth in the county. Is the county going to be responsible for the regional impacts alone?
Well, if you look at that map, most of the regional projects are state highway systems. They're not county roads; they're statewide highway systems. So as you brought it up, the growth not only occurs in the city, it grows in the state of California. The transportation on the 99, how much of it is driven by people who don't even live in Tulare County? So I think this kind of goes back to the issue of transportation in California in general. Weight fees need to be brought back to the state highway system. We need to bring to bear all the resources from the state to deal with their state highway system. It's their system. It's their road system. And it's our system in the sense that we're all residents of California. But to look to the county to pay for, the needs of the 99 south of Tulare are not being driven by future development in Tulare County. They're driven right now by the needs that are there, that exist. And they're only going to get worse, not just because of growth, and probably very little related to the growth in Tulare County, far more to the growth that's going to occur statewide, county or and valley-wide. So I think Phil hit the nail on the head. if this is not going to be, when we went forward with Measure R, we did the polling, we had the public behind us, they were supportive, they knew the roads were in dire straits in Tulare County, and they were willing to put their vote and their money where their mouth was. If there's not that kind of support for this project, why are we beating our heads against the wall and continuing to do it? And I don't say there isn't a need for it or demand for it. On the future of dealing with this somehow, but I just don't see this as being the vehicle. I don't think it's got the support to do it. So,
to jump on the other side of the fence here, I just saw a report. California lost 1 million people in the last 10 years. I mean, we
still had a net growth, but I know what you're saying.
We had a net loss of 1 million people in the state of California.
There's still and that is an issue. We're talking about, these are all based upon suppositions. It's like a computer program. We assume X and we get Y. But the X may not happen. We don't know what the growth is going to be. There probably will continue to be growth in the valley because we have the affordability, we've got the space. If there's growth in the population of California, we're probably going to continue to see growth in the San Joaquin Valley. But anyway, so I don't know what you're getting from us here, Phil. I don't know what, you're getting a lot of different people saying things.
Unfortunately, it's been the same at the cities. There's a lot of back and forth, and no one willing to, put forth the either let's move forward or let's kill this. Because, from what I've seen, I don't see enough support to support it as it is. And when you start whittling more off of it, your colored lines get shorter and shorter and shorter. And in my opinion, when those lines get so short, when do we say this way's not going to work and we need to look at it a different way? Because there's still way too much opposition and misunderstanding. We can't get city councils that should understand how transportation works to understand this concept. All they got was, how come this county's not going to pay the same amount as we are? They didn't look at the need. They didn't look and see that all the colored lines were running through their cities. Couldn't see that. So very frustrating. And at this point, we've been bleeding money by the tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands. I think we're approaching the $300,000 mark on this thing, and I'm tired of spending money on something that I don't think is going to go anywhere.
That could have fixed a lot of road right there. I'm sorry.
Well, Mr. Chairman, because the cities are vacillating, and obviously this board has opposition in pro and con, why don't we just cut to the chase and bring it as an item to our next meeting to say where we stand, up or down vote by the Board of Supervisors, instead of waiting for the cities to vacillate back and forth and not give us an answer. I think there's enough sentiment on this board now to come to a decision.
Well, and that's exactly why I wanted to know how it's being accepted out there with the cities, because I know at those early meetings at TCAG, there was a lot of resistance in that room. So if this thing's going nowhere, then it needs to stop.
Mr. Chair, and I think we should also offer opportunity for public comments,
yes,
since Mr. Lane's been sitting so patiently.
Right. And we'll do that this time. Anybody wishing to address the board on this matter? Mike, I know you were up there once, but I didn't think that was all you had to say. So.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Mike Lane, Building Industry Association of Tulare and Kings County, 222 North Garden Street, Visalia. I just want to, I don't have an argument with anything that was said here today. I understand the need, and I appreciate Ted and his staff, the work they've done, and he's been very accommodating to me and very transparent in the whole process, and I'd like to thank him for that. But from a builder's point of view, a home builder's point of view, in the last 6 months, Visalia and Tulare and Porterville have all increased their impact fees by double-digit percentages. Now, some of that was catch-up because of deferrals in inflation factors during the Great Recession. But Visalia's went up about 11%, their transportation impact fee. Tulare's has increased 29%, and Porterville's 17%. So if you add the proposed regional transportation impact fee on top of those, you're going to add another 12% in Visalia, 14% in Tulare, and 26% in Porterville. Now, those fees are all constraints and impediment on housing. And it was mentioned that, you know, if you increase the cost of a house $1,000, several hundred families in Tulare County will not qualify for that mortgage. So it's definitely a constraint. I mean, true, lumber can go up, concrete can go up. They're all constraints. And there is a need for housing, and it's a state priority. Just look in Government Code 65580, and you'll find out that it is a high priority for local governments and the states, written right in the law. And another interesting fact, during the Great Recession, when very few building permits were being issued, the school population still went up. Schools weren't collecting any impact fees, but their school population was going up, and I think that holds for the general population. Just because you're not pulling building permits doesn't mean the population is not increasing in Tulare County. They're going to live somewhere. They may be doubling up, but they're going to, you know, they're still going to be here. They're still going to be creating traffic. So there's a disconnect. There's not a solid nexus between the population growth and the number of building permits being issued. It's just the way it is. So as a representative of the builders in Tulare County, members of the BIA, I have to oppose this, even though I understand all the points that were made here and that congestion is going to be an issue. But from a builder's point of view, I've got to oppose it from today till the final vote.
Anyone else wishing to address the board on this matter this morning? Ted, would that be helpful to TCAG if the board were to agendize this item, bring it back for action, and then weigh in with a vote of support or?
Well, I do. I think Supervisor Cox knows my frustration in that the mixed direction over the past 6 months trying to figure out what I'm supposed to do. So we keep refining and refining, and we need to know to stop refining or it's done.
We will do that. We'll set this in 2 weeks for action.
Perfect. Before TCAG meeting, it's perfect.
Okay. All right.
3 weeks?
No, we need to do it before TCAG meets.
Is that going to be, because that's the budget? Budget?
That's, we usually have a longer agenda.
Before the TCAG meeting, that's fine.
Okay. All right. I think we've had a lot of discussion today, so probably a more abbreviated kind of a conversation, I think, at that time. All right. All right. I saw Matt Cates walk in the room, so we'll move back to item 35. It's a presentation by Matt Cate. He's the CSAC Executive Director regarding an update on the California State Association of Counties. Welcome, Matt, to Tulare County. I don't know if you've been here before. If you have, I don't think you've been in our chambers. But
thank you, Mr. Chair. No, this is my first time presenting before your board. Of course, I've been to Tulare County before, but
probably down to 99.
Well, and had friends in Visalia and other things. But I want to say first, thank you very much for the invitation. It's my pleasure to be here. As you said, I'm Matt Cate. I'm the Executive Director of the California State Association of Counties. Appreciative of Tulare County and your investment in the association. Obviously, you as a board member, but also Supervisor Ishida has provided just recently valuable help in our fight for transportation dollars, and your CAO, Mr. Rousseau, has been very active and helpful as well, and I know that your county council is former president of that association. So a terrific involvement, and we really want to say thank you to begin with. We started out as the Supervisors Association in 1895. It was really just supervisors who were members. We, 30 years ago, expanded it to be the Association of Counties because we wanted to represent the CAOs and the county councils and the clerks and the 60 other affiliate organizations that really make counties work in a complicated system that we have today. CSAC has now really 4 key functions. The thing we spend the most time on is advocacy. We don't give political contributions to individual legislators or to parties. And so we believe that to be influential, we have to be experts. And so part of that is to come and to listen to our members. Part of that is to study. We have analysts in each of the major policy areas to help us understand what the best practices are, because ultimately we don't win any fights in the legislature unless we're right. So we have to convince them the public needs the changes that we're arguing for, or we lose every time to some special interests, some others who have a louder voice. So part of that is to be here and try to understand as well as we can what's happening and what your needs are. I'll talk a little bit about the various areas that we're working on right now in legislation, but first the other areas include education and training for supervisors and department heads through the CSAC Institute. I know a number of you have been through that. We also have a communications team that works on both social media, traditional media, and videos to try to get the message out about what counties do and the importance of county government. And then we have the litigation working group with the Association of County Councils. CSAC and the County Councils Association do amicus briefs on behalf of county governments throughout California. So those are the four main functions. If I could just give you a minute on what's happening in Sacramento and in Washington, D.C. First of all, in the special session, on my way here, I looked up the numbers for Tulare County and for the state. So statewide, the engineers put our county roads and bridges at about a 66 out of 100 scale. So that's an at-risk system statewide. Here in Tulare County, you do a little bit better than average. You're at a 68. But still work to do. If you wanted to fix that all yourselves, you would need $2.1 billion over 10 years to get everything fixed exactly as you would want it. Obviously, that's not a number that any of our counties can afford on their own. And so that's really the message we're trying to get across to the state legislature concerning the special session, and I'll turn to Congress in a minute. We know that both the Republicans and the Democrats have a different view on how to address the state's roads problems. It's been in all the news. We've been doing regional summits with our partners. In this case, we're partnered with the League of Cities, with the Alliance for Jobs, with the California Chamber of Commerce, and with the Business Roundtable, along with a number of other groups, to try to push forward. And we've got through in that every legislator now agrees that the roads need to be fixed and that the system is headed towards crisis. In Stanislaus County, where our president, CSAC's president, Vito Chiesa, is a supervisor, they have a bridge that rated 2 out of 100. So they won't let school buses go over that bridge anymore because it's just too dang dangerous. But it's hard to afford to build a new bridge in a county budget year to year. So that message has gotten through. So far, though, the folks on the two sides of the aisle really can't agree on the solution. Our position has been compromise. We know that there are state resources being wasted that could be more focused on our road system. We know that there have been shifts in the uses of funding in the past that could be shifted back. We believe that some of the reforms that are being brought forward by the Republicans and the minority in both the Assembly and the Senate have merit. At the same time, as we add them all up, they don't add up to enough to get us from where we are right now, which is at risk, to even satisfactory, about 72. It doesn't add up, and so we need additional revenues, and so we're trying to bring the two sides together if possible. Honestly, you would think with both business interests, labor, and local government all pushing together, we would be able to get some compromise, but it's going to be an election in 2016, and so far we don't have anything done, so we'll continue to push. I was in San Francisco yesterday, and they have transportation and transit issues that they're trying to deal with. But at that meeting, at least we learned that the U.S. Senate has taken a federal highway funding, their reauthorization bill, and got it through the Senate on a bipartisan basis. It now goes to the House. And so we're hopeful that at least the federal government will be able to fund their responsibilities in transportation. And we, of course, made the point that we hope the state could find a way itself.
Matt, is that a continuing resolution, or is that a new funding source in the whole?
The Senate passed 6 years, continuing resolution with 3 years funded. And so, which is as good as we've seen in a long time.
And new funding from new sources?
Cobbled together, cats and dogs, from a bunch of, not from gas tax, but from a bunch of different sources. Realignment. Well, first, let me talk about the budget. So, obviously, budget just passed. As I've been up and down the state, what I've really found is that the recovery has been uneven. So, especially in the Valley, depending on your economic base is really and has really made a big impact on your recovery. It's been uneven, and that has had an impact on public safety, which I'll get to in a minute. The good news is that this year the state had a significant surplus, and our argument was that you should repay your debts to cities and counties before you do anything else, and so that got through. The last of the pre-2004 mandate payments will go out this fall. So Mr. Rousseau should have the numbers. As I recall, it was about $1.865 million and another $247,000 coming, which is obviously not enough to address a major issue, but it helps. So we'll continue to now argue for the post-2004 payments for counties. But at the same time, we're seeing increased costs associated, for example, with public safety realignment. So again, in counties where there's plenty of jail space, in counties where there's a lot of resources, in counties where we've seen a significant economic recovery, they're doing quite well in realignment. In other counties where there's crowding and where government services have been cut, we're seeing struggles, especially around property crime, as we're seeing some offenders who are cycling through, especially experts, auto thieves and others who we've got to find a way to incapacitate because we're not doing a very good job rehabilitating them. I will give credit to the sheriffs and to the probation chiefs. They've done a really good job across the state in handling these new supervision responsibilities. But we're continuing to argue for additional funding for jails, especially where there's rehabilitative space. Another area is mental health. We're asking for additional funding in mental health. Again, an area where realignment doesn't work is when you have offenders who they're too mentally ill to really comply with any set of supervision standards. And so we just need additional mental health funding. I want to also talk briefly about agriculture, natural resources, and environment. In particular, as you know, we've been talking to the folks that are going to put the 2016 recreational marijuana initiative on the ballot. It's still polling at above 60%. I doubt our board will take a support position on something like that, but I will say this. We have been talking to them about, we meaning us and the League of Cities, about, and RCRC, about local control and taxing authority. The impacts on the environment have been horrific so far, especially in Northern California, and so we're very concerned about that. I've mentioned administration of justice and the debt. I think there's more here, but I just want to emphasize really a couple of points. First of all, again, as I said, Tulare County has done a great job of engaging with CSAC, and I think the key to that is that you've got to get to know your colleagues up and down the state. It was pointed out to me recently that 40 out of 120 legislators all represent Los Angeles County. So one county, 40 members of the legislature. So for us, our task is to try to get the legislature to understand what's needed to be done in all of California counties. To make that happen, I need Los Angeles and Orange and San Diego and San Francisco legislators to fight for Tulare County and Stanislaus County and Kings County and the other counties where they have a smaller number of folks that represent them. And the best way to do that is for you, is for my electeds, the people that I work for, to get to know the elected supervisors in those counties so we can have those face-to-face conversations. It's really been the most effective way, because then they can impact their legislative caucus, and we can try to move things forward. So again, thank you for what you've done. As I talk to my staff, we emphasize at CSAC one thing over and over again. We're not CSAC. The staff are stewards of your organization. The county supervisors are the owners of CSAC, and we try to do what we can to take actions according to our board's platform and according to what we think in this difficult world that collectively you would want us to do. It's not always easy, because your views are not the same as the views of the legislators in the Bay Area. And your priorities are not the same necessarily as those as the Los Angeles County Board. But you have more in common with your colleagues than you have differences. Around transportation, you're on a united front. Along the areas of making sure we have sufficient funding to deal with realignment, you're on a united front. To get the state to repay their debts, you're on a united front. To deal with the mentally ill, you're on a united front. And so forth and so on. And so really that's our task at CSAC. And again, the reason I'm here is to interact with you, to thank you for your involvement, encourage you to continue down that path. We'll be in Monterey County the first week in December for our annual meeting. It's a great opportunity to go and to meet folks and to talk about what's happening here in Tulare County. And I think what you'll find is your colleagues are interested and they want to help if they can, and I know I do. So with that, I'll take any questions that you have.
Are there questions? Supervisor Sheeta.
Matt, before you got here, we had that meeting Friday in Fresno, Atkins Roundtable. I think the major concern we have as supervisors is the fact that the state doesn't have any credibility on the money side. If we pass new revenues from transportation, they steal them. The other part, the heartache, is on the weight fee, truck weight fees, needs to come back in the transportation pot. So if the state shows good effort of repaying the $4 billion they've transferred already and brings the weight fees back into the transportation pot, I think they would have support from all the counties. There's no question in my mind that we have to raise revenues for transportation. The issue that's coming up again is that San Francisco, Los Angeles is trying to siphon off this money back to transit. And that always happens is that they always pull money, a bulk of money from roads repair back to transit. I think it would be helpful if these transit systems would raise their fare box. The fare box on public transit is really relatively low, and that would show some good faith to us, and they could raise some revenues. So those are the main issues, but I think without the credibility of the state, which they have not proven they have much credibility about lockbox money, it's going to be very difficult to get support from the counties and the cities.
So let me address a couple of those issues, Supervisor. Those are good points. We strongly believe the money has to be constitutionally protected. Even if you believe that this governor and this legislature would fulfill their promise that these revenues would go to transit, the problem is that we're going to turn around in 3 years and we're going to have a new governor and a new legislature. And they're going to say, those weren't my promises. And so that we've seen that, as you've said, again and again. And it's true. They're not that. Each new legislature feels like they've got an obligation to deal with the situation that they're faced with. And so that's why we have to get the money locked up via the Constitution. There's no other way around it. I agree with you 100%. The shift of the truck weight fees back to local transportation is difficult. As you've probably read, the state's position has been that they cut a deal some number of years ago to exchange one pot of money for another, right? In the budget crisis, it all got swapped, and they can point to how there was a deal with the legislature and the governor concerning truck weight fees in exchange for other dollars. I think it's much simpler to unwind it and have truck weight fees go back to local roads, if that means other dollars need to backfill the general fund hole, because it's $1 billion general fund hole that will create, and that's why the Department of Finance is against it, we may have to backfill that. Well, it seems to me that's probably worth it. The other thing that on local transit, we've been arguing that cap and trade funding is a great source of funding for local transit. And we know it reduces GHGs. That's the very purpose of it. And so, again, from our perspective in the coalition, if we can spend some cap and trade money on transit, maybe that's less dollars it'll need to go from traditional transportation revenues than it can go to fixing potholes and fixing bridges in California. So at least we don't have very much difference from the viewpoints you laid out. We still haven't seen the coming together on this, though, Mr. Chair.
I think this is a critical issue to all of us in all counties. And when Supervisor Sheeta said $4 billion, I don't know if he was talking about the weight fees that have been siphoned off, or you talking about because I remember some years ago when the legislature would routinely, when they had financial problems, simply siphon off transportation dollars, take it right from Caltrans to pay for their operations. I've never heard anybody talking about paying those dollars back, if that's the $4 billion you're talking about. But I don't know who struck a deal on what on the weight fees, but the voters of California voted a general obligation bond for what they're now paying, using the weight fees to pay those bonds back. That was not a deal struck with the public, with the voters of California. They agreed that they were willing to use general fund dollars. They may not have understood what that meant, but that's what the proposition said. That's what people voted for. For the legislature then to turn around and take the dollars out of transportation, in my mind, is really short of. We're playing a game here of I can't get the term right now.
The RICO Act is
it's like theft. I mean, it's like, yeah. So anyway, I just think I agree with Supervisor Sheeta. The state has to come forward and prove itself. And I agree we have to make these things constitutionally guaranteed, but we've got to go back. We can't just start from now. Because if we don't get those dollars back from the weight fees, if we don't look at the way the diesel taxes are all going to $760 million a year, going 100% to transit, not $1 going for road maintenance and repair, when we know the major use of diesel are trucks, and they're the major impact on our roads above and beyond weight fees, way beyond weight fees. If we don't look at the way Caltrans operates and how it costs us so much money to produce one mile of roadway into California versus every place else in the country, I'm sorry, it's hard for me to justify giving the state of California more money until we take a hard look at how they're spending that money right now. Senator Morlock, who used to be, of course, supervisor from San Diego County, recently put out a little visual. The state of California, the income from all of the various, fees and taxes on transportation is $20 billion a year, and Caltrans is spending $2 billion or something like that. I mean, he had the numbers there, but it just demonstrates. I don't think there's a problem with enough money. I think there's a problem with allocation of money. At the last CSAC conference, when Senator Leno got up and spoke, there was this $7 billion, I think, or $8 billion of additional revenue to the state, but 7 of that was going to go back to the school. So to the public, it's like, well, the state's rolling in money. Well, they had to pay back their bills to the school system, so they only had $1 billion. So of the $1 billion, Senator Leno is proposing that they should give $700 million of that to the schools. And my thought was, they're getting $7 billion. Why would you take that one remaining $1 billion and give it to education when you could be paying back some of that money that you took away from transportation? It wasn't even on his radar. It wasn't on their screen that should go, when there's extra dollars, let's put it towards capital projects, which the state used to spend a lot more money, a lot bigger percentage of its revenue on. So I mean, that's the struggle that I think we have a very conservative board here, and our conservative nature has stood Tulare County very well. We are in great financial shape because of being conservative with our dollars. If we saw that same kind of conservativeness at the state level, we wouldn't be facing the problems we're facing today. So we look for conservative answers. We look for reform, regulatory reform. We look for reallocation of dollars to be spent where they get the most bang for the buck where they're really doing something. CEQA reform, where we don't spend all this money, just spending CEQA money for rehab, what a ridiculous concept. So, I mean, those are some of the struggles I think this board has with the state of California. And, of course, I'm not one to hold back when I speak at board of directors meetings either. My thoughts come out. But I think it's shared by a lot of other counties as well.
I think that's absolutely right. And one way to look at it is it's a great opportunity to leverage some of those reforms. The truth is we need, we can't get anything done on this issue without 2/3 vote out of the legislature. And so on CEQA reform, we've definitely put forward, we need to have it, especially on the repairs, to have to do full CEQA or any kind of neg deck on just repairing existing roads. We agree is ridiculous. There's also permitting reform. It takes too long to get these projects through the permitting process, which slows down all of our progress. We think that needs to happen. I think our coalition all agree on reforming what's happening at Caltrans and making the state more efficient. I don't know that we disagree on anything that you've just said. Now, we know some things are harder than others, right? And so the weight fees and going backwards to get the weight fees that have already been spent on other things, it's on our list of available funds. It's not on anyone else's list. I'll put it that way. And so, and at the same time, raising revenues, recognizing that the gas tax has been at 18 cents since 1994, and obviously 18 cents a gallon isn't worth today what it was in 1994. It doesn't buy as much pavement or work as it used to. Everyone kind of agrees with that. But it's a big hurdle to get folks who are from conservative districts to vote on any kind of new revenue, unless, like you said, the reform list has got to be all there. And we still have hope that we can get to that point and get some real progress on the reforms and get some additional revenues that we need to address these problems, or else we're going to walk away and both sides will see themselves as right, but we won't have the funding that we need.
Well, raising the gallon tax would not have been a big issue if it wasn't for the cap and trade fee they put on refineries, which is passed through to us now, and people realize that. I remember we were in Washington, D.C. 3 years ago or 4 years ago as a valley telling our electeds in Congress, raise the damn fuel tax. But then every time then you get cut out from underneath it when they raise the cap and trade tax that doesn't go to roads.
Matt, welcome to Tulare County. Gene Rousseau, CAO. I've got a few questions for you. First of all, good job with CSAC.
Thank you.
And on board. Have you heard any discussions about additional round of funding for jail construction in addition to 863, which we're going to be applying for? Secondly, and there are just three questions. Secondly, is the marijuana proposition. I sat in a workshop approximately a year ago that was put on by some folks from Colorado, and your counterpart was on that group, and they talked about the development of the law. And the issue they're having in Colorado, among others, is the sheriffs are still having an issue with the district attorneys prosecuting marijuana crimes. So despite the legalization effort being passed, they're still having the same issue we're having now. And you're being an ex-prosecutor, I'd be interested in getting your take on it. And lastly, biggest issue in Tulare County is a drought, and we're not hearing as much. We're somewhat disappointed with the monies in the governor's budget. We appreciate the monies being put in, but when we go to apply for them, we're finding that majority of them are already allocated. And we are the epicenter of the drought. East Porterville is on the news virtually every day in every country. So just your take on that and so on. Thank you.
Thank you. So on jail funding, I haven't heard no from the administration on another round. I think they recognize the need still exists. Even after Prop 47, which brought its own round of issues, Population of jails went down, but we still have jails that are impacted. We still agree with the state that we need better facilities that have some ability to provide some rehabilitative programming if inmates are going to serve 2, 4, 8 years in a county jail system. That has to be addressed. And so while they haven't gotten to yes, they also haven't said no, which is a good start when it comes to negotiations with the state. On marijuana, I met with my colleagues from Washington and Colorado this year and walked through the problems. And it really, one of the problems is you have a bifurcated system there. You have one set of rules for recreational marijuana, and you have another set of rules for medicinal marijuana. And some of that confusion has led to the problems that you've discussed. One of the things is they're taxed differently. Another is you can have obviously dry areas and areas where it's legal to sell. And then finally you have these ambiguities around the laws and the small penalties that have led DAs to not want to take these issues on. As I've been up and down the state, especially in Northern California, the spoilage of our natural resources by these growers, these illegal growers, is devastating. They are siphoning water illegally, dumping chemicals. Just the dangers and the devastation to the environment have been terrible.
And Matt, that's not limited to just Northern California. That's a huge issue for all the grows sites in the forest here in Tulare County.
Yeah, thank you.
And also for this year with the drought situation, the water usage for growing marijuana is quite high, and so I have an unincorporated community that their well didn't go dry, but they were taking more water than it could provide. So a couple times now they've had to go down and have boil notices and so forth, and it's because they're using too much water, and we think a big part of that is marijuana growth. So it has an environmental impact up and down the state. It's not limited to just Northern California.
Yeah, I don't think it's possible to underestimate the problems that are going to come with recreational marijuana. I mean, I'm not here to take a position on it one way or the other, right? That's not my job. But it is extremely complicated, and there have been really difficult problems for local governments to solve everywhere that's passed so far. I was glad we were able to meet with the drafters of what looks to be the most well-funded proposition, and they took some of our suggested edits in terms of our concerns, or we didn't give edits, but we said, you know, we may oppose, but even if we oppose, we think that we need to have local control for taxation. We need to have a statewide system to be able to do the testing and the licensing, and we need to have local control regarding zoning and all the same authority that you have today. We'll see if they take it, but it's fraught with peril. Regardless of which way you believe on the issue, it's going to be complicated. Water, you know, I think the issue the public didn't understand is that when the governor issued those bonds, much of it was to cover projects that were already slated to move forward, already tied up, as you say. It's a very good point. The truth is that that already we know that there are emergency, like here in Tulare County, which you're right is the epicenter. We've got to get funding moving forward to address these issues immediately. We need additional storage. That has to happen, but it's going to take a long time. And so, again, we have environmental review issues we need to address. And from our perspective, we need to make sure that emergency funding is coming to Tulare County in sufficient levels that you guys can do your jobs to get your residents through this period.
And to that, I would like to say that we have had very good response from state, our OES officers out busily working now, but they have been very responsive to us in many ways. And we do, of course, run into some issues, but by and large, they have been very good partners with us, and we've been able to accomplish some long-term goals with some short-term emergency funds, and that's kind of the direction we're trying to go. We're trying to use these funds in a wise way. I mean, you can use a lot of money to haul water, or you can put some pipes in the ground. And then later on, those pipes can be utilized for a long-term, permanent type of solution, as opposed to just quit hauling water now because you got wells redrilled or something. So we've been working closely, and we're very appreciative of the state's emergency efforts.
Well, and if there's anything we can do, Secretary Ghilarducci is obviously a former colleague of mine, and if we can use our influence in Sacramento to expedite things, if you run any bumps in the road, we're here to do exactly that. As I said, I remind my staff every day, we're here to represent the supervisors and the counties, and whatever you need, we're here to do it.
Supervisor Cox wanted to ask you.
I want to hit another hornet's nest here. High-speed rail. One of my big concerns, state funding wise, is that we've got these deadlines to spend the money, and I don't see how in the world they can spend the money in time to keep the money. Have you heard anything about how the state plans to backfill the federal money that we may have to give back? I mean, I'm just really concerned about that, because we're building this, and I'm concerned the money's going to dry up. Where are we going to get it? Where are we going to steal money from? State's been stealing money from other pots. Which pot are they going to go after to backfill or to even finish this first segment?
Right.
Cap and trade.
Well, right. So we know that 25% of the cap and trade dollars are going to the high-speed rail. That it doesn't appear that that's going to be anywhere near enough. The governor has promised a significant investment from the private sector. That hasn't materialized as of yet. So all of those are good points. I don't have an answer for you, Supervisor. I will tell you this. It's one of those areas that the supervisors across California do not exactly see eye to eye on completely. There are still a number who really believe in high-speed rail. There are a number who are on the fence, and there are some who have just given up on it and are concerned about the very issues that you raised, Supervisor. So we're trying to convey information the best we can. But it's not an area that CSAC has been able to weigh in too deeply, again, because we're kind of divided as a family.
Thank you.
Matt, appreciate very much for being here today. And do you have any questions for us?
No questions. As I said, your CAO is again very active. Your county council is very active, and so we get a lot of information that way. Obviously, as you said, Supervisor, you haven't been exactly a shrinking violet in our board meetings, and so I hear Tulare County's viewpoint loud and clear, and that's what I'm here today to do. Right? As I said, I was at San Francisco yesterday, and I'll be in another county, in a few weeks, and it's helpful for me to hear how passionate you are about the values and the policies that are important to this county, because it's a good reminder for me about what those issues are. So I'm grateful for the time here. Yeah.
Hey, real quick, Matt, that just after you said that just made me really want to thank you for coming. This is the first time in the 7 years I've been on the board that the executive director of the state association that we pay dues to has actually been here to make this sort of presentation. So it's very much appreciated. I think you're getting a heck of an education in what is important to counties, especially going from the far north in San Francisco to Tulare County here today. So it's much appreciated, and safe travels, and hope the rest of it's great for you as well.
I'll end with this. I'll make sure that Gene has my cell phone number. You can call me or text me if you want to have a conversation, if you have a concern, if there's an issue associated with something happening in your district that you think I can help on. I want to be personally available to you to do whatever I can to support you in your efforts to represent your constituents. So thank you.
Before you leave, Matt, I was going to say, I think you're going to stick around. Is that right? Yeah. Okay. The last time we had a CSAC executive director at this meeting was when my predecessor was recommending that Tulare County pull out of CSAC as a participating county. So it's nice that you're here on not those terms, but because and I think it is wise to this, because even when you look at a board of directors which is made up of 58 counties, it's pretty difficult. In many ways, the organization is a top-down model. You have an executive committee, you have the executive director, and to get a bottom up, you almost have to kind of do these tours, I think, to come to the counties themselves and see the supervisors in action and talk to them individually, because it's pretty difficult to do it in the context of the way the system is designed. So
I think that's right.
thank you for being here.
Thank you very much for the invitation,
Thank you,
for your patience and for your input. Madam Clerk, can I give that to Mr. Rousseau? Thank you.
And we'll be finished up here fairly quickly, man. Okay.
Not that quick.
So we are at the 39 presentation given by the County Administrative Officer regarding an update on the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, provide direction to staff in regards to implementation of the act. Welcome, Mrs. England, again.
Denise England, Tulare County Administrative Office, and I will do my best to move quickly. That's a fun light show. I know there's 35 slides here, and I can assure you we're not going to spend a whole lot of time. The first 20 years, an overview of the Act. I know some board members have been more active than others in the conversations about the Act, so I wanted to give a quick overview. And then the second half is about what's happening in our 3 priority subbasins. So just for your edification, these are the acronyms that will be used throughout the presentation. Probably the most important are the GSA, which is a Groundwater Sustainability Agency, and SGMA, which is what the Act is being called these days, because you can't say all the words for anything water or government related, I think. So in the overview, the outline is to talk about the SGMA legislative intent, the GSA formation, what happens that triggers state intervention, revising basin boundaries, and then developing a groundwater sustainability plan. So SGMA was passed so that local agencies would have the authority and technical and financial assistance necessary to sustainably manage groundwater and to provide as much local control as possible. In order to become a groundwater sustainability agency, the Act defines the GSA as one or more local agency, and a local agency is defined as a public agency that has water supply, water management, or land use responsibility. So in our basins, those are irrigation districts, California water districts, water conservation districts, the county, the cities, and also PUDs and CSDs that have water authority. And a GSA can be formed by a number of ways. You could have a single GSA. You could have a single GSA that is a combination of public agencies through a JPA or through a MOU. And also it provides that a water corporation regulated by the PUC can participate in a GSA if the other agencies agree. And in Tulare County, we have one such public utility, and that is, water corporation, and that is Cal Water Service that serves the city of Visalia, as well as Goshen, West Goshen, and some folks outside of the city limits. So the powers and authorities that are given a GSA, most of these powers already exist within the county structure, but this gives those powers to other entities that wish to form a GSA. And a GSA can only conduct business as it relates to their groundwater sustainability plan. So what's the county's role in a GSA formation? And we'll talk a little bit more about this later, but the county becomes the presumed manager of any area within a subbasin that's not covered by a GSA. So we're sort of the backstop. But we can also elect not to serve as a GSA, which would then trigger the state to come in and intervene. And we'll talk a little bit more about this later. The process involves public outreach. All of these stakeholders, as well as others, these are the ones that are relative to Tulare County. There's a full list included in the water code section. Outreach needs to be made to all of these stakeholders. And then it's a multi-step process. There's a noticing and a public hearing. and then you have to develop governance documents, and then you provide notice to DWR, and then there's a 90-day objection to notice period. After that time, the noticing entity becomes a GSA for that area. And to date, there hasn't been any objections to the 90 days. Several of there's a handful of entities that have put in a notice. They're in that 90-day period, and it's expected that they will become a GSA. And we'll talk about more about that in a little bit. So when does the state intervene? The state can intervene in two instances. The first is if by June 30th, 2017, a GSA is not developed that covers the entire basin. So if a portion of a subbasin is not covered, that subbasin could potentially become a probationary basin, which would trigger state intervention. The way the act is written is that if it's just a portion of the subbasin, that portion could just be deemed probationary. The danger is once you initiate state intervention, they're probably going to look at the entire subbasin, and it'll probably have a ripple effect. The other time that the state can come in is if after January 30th or 31st of 2020, if the state board looks at the groundwater sustainability plan and deems that just based on the written document that subbasin is not going to come into sustainability, then they can also initiate the probationary basin process. SGMA allows for revising basin boundaries. The boundaries currently are the ones found in DWR Bulletin 118, and those regulations are being formed now by Department of Water Resources, and then they will be adopted by the Water Commission, and those are expected to be adopted this fall. There's a couple of instances where basin boundaries can be adjusted. The first is scientific, so for hydrological reasons, and then the second is for jurisdictional purposes. And I believe that Tulare County, there's one particular subbasin that it would be beneficial to have a boundary adjustment based on a jurisdictional reason, and I'll show that to you. This is a very busy picture, but in order to do any sort of modification, you can see that it's pretty involved. So the one that we would be looking at is this, and it requires coordination with other entities as well as some mapping. And as you can see, during that process, a groundwater sustainability agency is formed. And then you get to the plan, and the plans have to you can either, even if you have multiple GSAs, they could still write a single plan, or you could have multiple GSAs and write multiple GSPs. Obviously, from the county's perspective, the more groundwater sustainability plans you have, the more complex it is to implement when you talk about land use and planning decisions for the folks in RMA. And I have met with them, and we will continue to talk. The purpose of the GSP is to prevent these undesirable results, and those are reduction in groundwater storage and groundwater levels, seawater intrusion, degraded water quality, subsidence, and adverse impacts on beneficial uses. All groundwater sustainability plans have to include these elements: historical data, groundwater levels, quality, subsidence, and groundwater surface water interaction, historical and projected water demands and supplies, and a map. And then it also has to include measurable objectives that are on a 5-year incremental milestone schedule. And then they have to achieve sustainability within 20 years. If there are multiple plans in a subbasin, the GSPs all have to utilize these same common 7 assumptions, which are groundwater elevation data, groundwater extraction data, surface water supply, total water use, change in groundwater storage, water budget, and sustainable yield. So you can see that even with multiple plans, a lot of uniformity is required by the Act. So how is this all playing out in Tulare County? We'll go over the subbasin prioritization, efforts to date in each of the 3 subbasins, and some next steps. So this is an ugly map, but these are our 3 high-priority subbasins. We have the Kings in the north, the Cahuilla in the middle, and the Tule here. You'll see in this area right here, the Tulare Lake subbasin juts in, and we'll talk about that in a potential basin boundary adjustment in just a few slides. So this is the King subbasin. The colored areas are the various public agencies that are eligible to become a GSA under the Act. There is a coordination effort taking place housed out of the Kings River Conservation District. I attend those meetings regularly. There's several GSAs forming out of that. The one that impacts Tulare County the most is this region here, and they are working on forming the Kings East GSA. So the Kings East GSA is an effort led by the Alta Irrigation District. It includes Tulare and Fresno counties, the cities of Dinuba, Orange Cove, and Reedley, Alta Irrigation District, Orange Cove Irrigation District, Hills Valley Irrigation District, and Tri-Valley Water District. The proposed governance structure is to have 3 urban seats, 1 for each city, 2 county seats, 1 for each county, 1 seat for Alta Irrigation District, 1 irrigation district seat that would be shared by the 3 districts, and then 1 community seat, which would be shared by the domestic water districts that exist in that region, and then that group would appoint 1 member from agriculture, which would be recommended by Farm Bureau. Assemblyman Perea introduced AB 1135 this last session, which would have formed a special act district and created that governance structure. However, it was converted to a 2-year bill and put off while some coordination was done with the balance of the basin. And so now that group is looking at potentially forming a JPA or an MOU, and they meet regularly, and Supervisor Worthley and I attend those meetings. This is the map of what the region would look like. So the purple is the Alta Irrigation District, and you can see the districts, the other districts. The red line is the existing basin boundary. They'll be in the bill that was sponsored. It called for the counties to establish the boundaries of the GSA, but since that bill was pushed off, the group is now looking at what their boundaries would look like, and so the eastern boundary will most likely stay the same. They're looking at snapping the southern boundary to the Alta Irrigation District, this western boundary here to the county line, and then potentially incorporating this hole that was originally cut out of the basin. And then the northern boundary, they're vetting with Fresno County. Any questions on that one? So that effort is moving forward. And it's been a collaborative effort, and I feel that it's going well. In the Cahuilla Subbasin, we were able to take advantage of facilitation services that were offered by the state board at no charge. The public agencies as well as other stakeholders have held 3 meetings to date. The facilitators did individual interviews with the eligible agencies to figure out where everyone was relative to a GSA formation. Excuse me. And then the outcome of that is a GSA formation report, which is still in draft form, and we'll be meeting again on September 28th to look at a final report for that. In the meantime, the city of Visalia and the city of Tulare and the Tulare Irrigation District have come together and formed what they're calling the Mid-Cahuilla JPA, which will be a Mid-Cahuilla GSA. And these 3 entities have filed a notice of intent with Department of Water Resources to become a GSA. And I have a map on the next slide of what their boundaries would look like. And then the balance of the Cahuilla Basin include 4 cities. There are small cities: Wood Lake, Farmersville, Exeter, and Lindsay. The Cahuilla Delta Water Conservation Districts, 5 water districts outside of Cahuilla Delta's boundaries, and the county of Tulare. So the Mid-Cahuilla is the aggregate of, and this is not a great map up here, but the aggregate of the boundary of the city of Visalia, which kind of comes in as a little peninsula into the Tulare Irrigation District, and then the city of Tulare, and that would be their area that they would manage under that GSA. And then these are the public agencies within the Cahuilla Subbasin. So the green line is the Cahuilla Delta Basin, Cahuilla Delta boundary. Over to the east, you'll see the remaining irrigation districts that are outside of that boundary. And then you can also see the white areas along the east side and a little bit along the southern edge of that basin. Supervisor Ishida was approached last week by the president of the Kuya Delta Board to potentially partner with the Kuya Delta Board to form some sort of centralized ground GSA for the Kuya subbasin. And I know that Kuya Delta's board is also meeting this morning to discuss that option. And so any movement towards that effort would require that I come back at a later date to bring an action item of some sort. But to keep that in mind when you're providing direction at the end of the presentation. And Supervisor Ishida, I don't know if you wanted to speak to that at all or just wait. Okay. In the Tule subbasin, they have been meeting and they have been approaching it with multiple GSAs, writing multiple GSPs. There's one city, that's the city of Porterville, Tulare County, and more than 15 districts. And this is the subbasin that is ripe for a boundary adjustment. And it's this little triangle piece off to the east, just north of Alpaugh Irrigation District. It covers, it's mostly white area that's not covered by a district, but there's a little piece of Angiola Water District and a little piece of Alpaugh Irrigation District. And the timing on GSA formation and boundary adjustment and other regulations that are coming out it's a cart before the horse sort of issue, but you're sort of subject to what the state says you have to do. So if a boundary adjustment is needed in this area or desired in this area, the county would probably need to take the lead on that effort. And the window of opportunity is January to April of 2016, and then you wouldn't have another opportunity until 2020. So between now and 2020, if we didn't do anything about this boundary, we may end up with 4 subbases versus 3, and I think 3 is probably too many anyway. The other item of this subbasin is off to the east where there's, in the southeastern corner where there's quite a bit of white area. It's unknown really where the groundwater really lies out there, and so there may be an opportunity to adjust that boundary westward and thereby reducing the amount of area that needs to be managed. That would require some hydrologist work to happen, but certainly it may be worth the while to reduce the amount of managed area. The other issue with this subbasin is while in the Kings and the Cahuilla there's data basin-wide and a groundwater model basin-wide, this one is limited mostly to the Deer Creek Tule River Authority, so the white areas don't have monitoring points and we don't have data. So another benefit to potentially becoming a GSA in this area would be to address those data gaps and start to work towards creating those 7 components that have to be incorporated in all of the plans for the subbasin. And there may also be a grant opportunity for that. So the possibilities of forming a GSA, this was a model that was suggested to the Cahuilla group. Obviously, there's an existing GSA with the mid-Cahuilla folks, but having, for the balance of the basin, having a centralized GSA and then the LIA, which I didn't put on the acronym because I wanted to fool you, I guess, those are local implementing agencies. So those could be the individual districts, and they could select from a menu of what they want to do. If they want to just do monitoring and reporting and then the larger GSA do the rest, or if they want to do all of it and just feed the information back to the larger GSA, and then that central GSA would interface with the state. And so it provides probably the best coordinated coverage for the subbasin and increases our odds of keeping state intervention out. And so the next slide is just what it would look like with the mid-Cahuilla group in the Cahuilla subbasin. You'd have to have that steering committee for the 2 GSAs to come together. So with that, I'd ask the board to provide any feedback, and then also what the board's preference is concerning the moving forward in any of the 3 subbasins.
I assume Supervisor Ishida will want to weigh in about this time.
Well, it's extremely important that all members of this board get very familiar with the GSA process. It spans all our districts, and it's a little more complicated than what's presented up here. what we're finding, though, is a reluctance of the people in the basins, their individual basins, to organize to form the GSA or a basin-wide GSA. So it's extremely important, especially in the white areas, that the county step up and make sure these GSAs are formed. And we're going to, in my opinion, going to have to take a leadership role as a county in making sure this happens. And the white areas are under our jurisdiction, but we have all the other areas we have to pull together to come with a basin-wide plan. It's going to take some time. We don't have a lot of time to do it. So I think that's why I'd like everybody to get familiar with it, because I'm sure we're going to have to use some of our authority the legislature gave us to make this happen.
If I just might, I'm fortunate up in my neck of the woods because Alta Irrigation has been very aggressive moving forward, and the reason for the need of special legislation is because of their effort to bring agriculture into the mix, because agriculture is not a public entity, and so that's why there's a bill presented to do that. There's been some concerns expressed by other, not within Tulare County, but in the Kings Basin about that particular process. So hopefully we'll get those things worked out. My understanding now, Kuya is agreeing to step up, and that's a conservation district, and that's a new development, I believe. So that's good. So now we're looking at the Thule, and I think you're right, though. We need to look at making sure the boundaries are adjusted appropriately, because a lot of that eastern side of it is really that's dryland farming out there, and it's not really a part of it's not part of the usual basin as we think of it out there. But we probably need some hydrological reports to confirm that. Supervisor Cox.
Oh, a question for Denise. What issues? I mean, as I heard about the city of Tulare and Visalia and Thule Irrigation, forming their GSA, it seemed like they carved a heart out of the middle of this piece. What issues does that, raise? I mean, what concerns do we need to have, if any?
Well, certainly, management-wise, from the county's perspective, to do land use and planning in those areas is it creates another layer. Also, in regard to the balance of the subbasin, whatever plan that group comes up with has to be coordinated very carefully and knit together very well to satisfy the state that both plans will lead to sustainability, and that they're in agreement and they do not conflict.
So with the piece that would surround that, then, because I'm looking at that, it's pretty much surrounded by another GSA. Mm-hmm. They would have to work together, and they would have to meld together.
The magic word there is coordination, because the Act envisions you could have multiple GSAs. I mean, every Tom, Dick, and Harry, every agency could have their own GSA if they want to and their own plan, but they have to all be coordinated. And the more you have, the more complicated that probably is going to become, because that coordination effort is critical, because at the end of the day, the basin has to have a plan which gets to sustainability with a 20-year time horizon.
The GSA that's been formed that you're referring to is not going to be viewed as an island. The state of California will not view that just as its own GSA, regardless of everybody surrounding it. You have to have a comprehensive plan, including that group. Now, I saw some new information last week that I think the city of Visalia and Tulare are going to be very surprised that they're ground zero for overdraft in the basin.
And that's the reason for requiring everybody to have uniformity, because in terms of how you have the same metrics, if you don't have the same metrics, how in the world are you going to coordinate these efforts? That you at least have some hope of being able to coordinate them by having everything have the same meaning. And
specific to this Mid-Kuya GSA, hydrologically speaking, in Tulare County and most regions, groundwater flows northeast to southwest. And so when you look at just the boundaries on the map, the city of Visalia, to get their recharge, they would have to partner with somebody, northeast of them anyway. So that, is inherent coordination and cooperation.
Mr. Chair, I would just make the point that I know there are several irrigation districts or maybe GSA entities here today and offer public comment at this time as well.
Yeah. Are any other questions, comments from the board to Denise? Are any members of the board of the various irrigation districts or other interested parties want to come and make comments to the board this morning? Don't feel obligated to, but if you want to. Yeah, it's close to lunchtime.
There you go.
All right. Thank you. Okay, so any further, this is an update just to give us information. It's actually kind of good news. I'm happy to hear
I'm really glad to hear Kuya Delta
stepping
Water
up, because I know there's an issue. A lot of the irrigation districts, I think, are reluctant because they don't like the enforcement side of it. But they have to deal with enforcement now. That you have water rights you give to people. If people violate them, I'm sure you have to engage enforcement. So this is a little larger scale, but
it's a little more complicated than that.
It'd take more than 35 slides to really get into the weeds on it.
A lot of the irrigation districts do not have the personnel or the expertise to put this together. A lot of them, from our last meeting, would be willing to put money into the pot for this plan to come together, because we at Delta and the county do not have funds set aside for this process. So we're going to have to coordinate with everybody we can coordinate with to put this plan together and finance putting this plan together.
And the key thing about the irrigation districts is they're the ones who have the information. They have the data. They've got they know their growers. They know what's being grown. They know what their water needs are and so forth. And so there is no need for us to reinvent wheels here. We need to take advantage of that knowledge that the districts have. They're really going to be the heart of the situation. Whether they want to be whether they want to be at the top of the organizational chart is another issue. But they're a critical player in this whole.
I think it's clear that it's nice to break things down into smaller parts. So we have 3 basins. The northern basin is clearly it looks like in the best shape in terms of data and how much they've been working on this. The middle part of the basin, I am curious why the cities went off with their irrigation district. I'm sure there's a reason for it, maybe lack of trust with the rest of the group and the county in general, who knows. But we'll find out shortly. It's that lower basin, the Tule Basin, that's going to be a challenge in terms of data collection and coming together as a group, if we can come together. There might be multiple GSAs in that area, who knows? We're already hearing rumors to that effect to begin with. Now, in terms of dollars for these plans, it's my understanding that the DWR just came out with some draft language on how they're going to fund these, but there's like a 50% match with the local agencies. So it's not going to be cheap, especially in the areas where we don't have modeling in place. We're going to have to develop that. So just to put that up.
And Mr. Chair, I'll just say that I know that it seems that the northern basin appears very much ahead of everyone else. But I do want to say no one's really made mention of the coordination efforts that have been taking place in the Tule sub-basin. But I do know that those groups are talking. They are working together and trying to move forward. Maybe it is with some separate plans within, but I do think that they are moving forward in terms of getting something established so that they can begin the data collection that is necessary in the areas where it is lacking currently. So, and I will just say that I don't know how my colleagues feel, but I'm sure they would agree. I know Steve made mention of the fact that the water expertise really does lie within the irrigation districts and the water conservation districts. But if there is any need for assistance from the county's perspective, we will definitely be willing to put efforts forward to assist and help and serve as a convener if necessary for any areas that are lacking that coordination.
Well, I want to reemphasize to the city of Tulare and the city of Visalia and Tulare Irrigation District, you will not be an island to yourselves. And if you think that you have a plan put together that makes you sustainable, that plan will not exempt you from the total basin plan.
Right. It's sustainability not on a GSA. It's on the basin. And there is the ability to create sub-basins, but that has to be based, well, there can be, like we talked about, like in the case of alt irrigation, there's a little strip of that's in Kings County. From an administrative standpoint, it probably makes a lot of sense for that to be included politically. And then you can have hydrological reasons for it, but there has to be a good justification for it.
I think one of the biggest obstacles from my district and from Pete's is these white areas and how we tie this thing all together and get everybody in the plan. So that's the thing we're going to be looking at.
Very good. That concludes our regular scheduled meeting today. We have a few items for closed session, Council.
Yes, you do, Mr. Chairman. Item A is off your board's closed session agenda. You have items B and C. I do anticipate an announcement. Announcement out of closed session today, September 1st, 2015, by Kathleen Bales-Lang, County Council. In the matter of item B on the board's closed session agenda, Fagundes and Walker versus County of Tulare et al. The board voted to provide a defense, to defend the action, and to provide a defense with a reservation of rights to individually named employee defendants on motion of Supervisor Ishida, seconded by Supervisor Ennis, on a unanimous vote. There are no other announcements.